As the night settles in, so can you. Let us know in the comments, where are you listening this and what is your current time. After that, close your eyes if you like. Nothing we're about to discuss is urgent or even particularly interesting. And let us begin. The dawn of another day in medieval London greets you not with birdsong, but with a whiff that makes you question your life's choices. You open your eyes to a city that's home to about 50,000 souls, crammed cheek by jowl into a space that seems to have forgotten the concept of fresh air. It's 1350, and London is a bustling hub of trade, commerce, and, let's not sugarcoat it, an olfactory assault. As you take a tentative sniff, you're met with the pungent aroma of open sewers that snake through the streets like unwelcome guests. These aren't your modern, underground, out-of-sight, out-of-mind sewers. We're talking about trenches filled with the collective waste of thousands. It's a special kind of bouquet, a blend of human waste, rotting food, and whatever else the neighbours decided they were done with. It's a bit like a medieval potpourri, except no one's rushing to market it. And then there's the tanneries. Oh, the tanneries. If you ever wondered what it would be like to live next to a business that boils animal hides in urine, well, congratulations, you're about to find out. The tanneries are necessary, sure, because people need leather for shoes, belts, and armour. But the stench of rotting flesh and chemicals is enough to make you consider a career in something less gag-worthy, like plague doctoring. Why, you ask, is the city allowed to smell like this? Well, let's talk about sanitation laws, or rather, the lack thereof. The concept of public health as we know it today is non-existent. Sure, there are some regulations, but enforcement is about as reliable as a medieval doctor's medical advice. Sanitation wasn't exactly a top priority for medieval city planners, who were more concerned with commerce and defence than with your nasal comfort. The sheer volume of people contributes to this aromatic overload. With everyone and their oxen crammed into what feels like a few square miles, the waste piles up faster than it can be disposed of. The streets are narrow, often muddy, and littered with refuse. And in a city where it's cheaper to chuck your waste out the window than to pay someone to haul it away, gravity becomes the preferred method of disposal. It's not just laziness, it's economics. Why pay for something when you can let Newton's laws do the work for free? Yet, there's a certain charm to this chaos, isn't there? A romantic notion of medieval life that's all about knights and chivalry, conveniently omitting the reality of chamber pots being dumped from above. But that's what makes history so fascinating, the stark contrast between legend and reality. And while the legends paint medieval London as a place of grand pageantry, the truth is, your daily life is a constant battle against the sensory onslaught of a city with a serious hygiene problem. As you step outside into the morning air, or what passes for air, you're part of a vibrant, if a bit smelly, tapestry of life. The streets are alive with the sounds of traders hawking their wares, the clatter of horse-drawn carts, and the occasional shout of "Gare there's le," a warning that liquid waste is incoming from above. It's a city teeming with life, with all its glorious messiness and smells, a testament to humanity's resilience and its ability to thrive even in less than ideal conditions. So, as you navigate through medieval London's fragrant landscape, remember that this is a city that's just as vibrant as it is pungent. It's alive with the hustle and bustle of people making do with what they have, finding ways to survive and even thrive in a world that doesn't exactly cater to creature comforts. And who knows, maybe someday someone will figure out how to make it smell better. But for now, you've got a day to live in 1350, and a city full of interesting, if occasionally malodorous, stories to uncover. Now that you're out and about in medieval London, prepare for a sensory overload that goes beyond the nasal assault. Welcome to the reality show of the 14th century, where the streets are less like boulevards and more like a game of dodge the dung. Picture this. Narrow lanes, barely wide enough to accommodate a horse-drawn cart, let alone the bustling crowd of traders, beggars, and the occasional noble on horseback. In fact, if you stretched your arms out, you could almost touch both sides of some alleys. It's cozy, if by cozy you mean claustrophobic. Amidst the chaos, there's a vibrant marketplace scene, a spectacle of human tenacity set against a backdrop of economic necessity. Stalls brim with everything from fresh produce to dubious-looking meats, their vendors shouting over the din to attract customers. If you're lucky, you might snag a deal on a bushel of apples for a penny. assuming they're not the ones that rolled into the muck earlier. But watch your step. Alongside the bustling commerce, the streets double as the city's unofficial garbage disposal. It's an all-you-can-smell buffet of refuse, with the occasional splash of something unpleasantly wet from above. Urban planning in medieval London could use a bit of a PR makeover. Actually, let's be real, it could use a complete overhaul. The lack of planning is palpable, as if the city were a living organism that grew haphazardly, adapting to the whims of its inhabitants rather than any grand design. Streets meander in a way that makes sense only if you're a local or have a sixth sense for navigating chaos. Maps? Good luck finding one that doesn't make you more lost. The Black Death had its grisly moment in the city, wiping out about half the population between 1348 and 1350. You might think this would make the streets less crowded, but the reality is less straightforward. Sure, there's temporarily more elbow room, but the filth? Oh, that's here to stay. The plague did little to clean up the city's act. If anything, it just added to the layers of grime, like some morbid archaeological strata. Yet, amidst this pandemonium, there's a rhythm to life that's oddly compelling. The markets are a hub of social interaction and economic exchange, humming with the energy of people bartering, gossiping, and haggling over prices. Fishmongers display their latest catch, while bakers hawk their bread, baked fresh, or at least fresh-ish this morning. The din is deafening but alive, a testament to human resilience and the relentless march of commerce. The economic realities of the time are as harsh as the streets themselves. Most Londoners are just trying to eke out a living, their livelihoods dependent on the ebb and flow of trade. The city is a commercial powerhouse, to be sure, but one built on the backs of those who labour day in and day out in less than ideal conditions. And don't think for a second that everyone's on equal footing. Wealth disparity is as apparent as the mud under your feet, with the rich living in relative comfort while the poor make do with whatever scraps they can muster. As you navigate this medieval metropolis, it's clear that the city is a living contradiction, a place where prosperity and poverty coexist in a delicate balance. It's a world where the romantic ideals of chivalry and gallant knights clash with the gritty reality of everyday survival. The grandeur of royal courts and grand tournaments is undeniably part of the story, but so too is the struggle of the common folk who keep the city's heart beating. So, as you wander through the tangled streets of 1350 London, remember that each twist and turn tells a story of its own. It's a city that refuses to be tamed, a place where commerce and chaos walk hand in hand. And while the legends might gloss over the less savoury details, the reality is far more complex and infinitely more human. After all, history isn't just about kings and castles. It's about the people who lived, struggled, and thrived in a world that was anything but orderly. And who knows, maybe by the time you've navigated your way through this historical labyrinth, you'll appreciate your modern streets and their sanitation systems just a little bit more. As you meander through the tangled web of medieval London, you stumble upon the Thames, that supposed lifeline of the city. Spoiler alert, it's less of a lifeline and more of a liquid landfill. Forget any notions of a picturesque riverbank with gentle currents and swans gliding gracefully by. This is more like nature's own garbage disposal, and not in a good way. The Thames in 1350 is a murky, sluggish beast, bearing the weight of the city's detritus. It's a dumping ground for everything from household waste to industrial runoff, a not-so-refreshing cocktail of filth that makes you reconsider any romantic notions of riverside living. The river doesn't just run through the city, it absorbs it, every bit of refuse and waste finding its way into its depths. Picture it as the medieval version of a group chat filled with spam, clogged, unpleasant, and best avoided. You'll find that the river's once abundant fish population has taken a nosedive worthy of a medieval bard's tragic tale. The Thames used to teem with fish, a veritable buffet for the city's inhabitants. But as more waste found its way into the water, fish populations dwindled faster than you can say environmental crisis. By this point, catching a fish in the Thames is akin to finding a clean public restroom. It's technically possible, but don't hold your breath. Let's talk numbers. The city's population of about 50,000 souls has been treating the river as a communal trash can, and it shows. An estimated 300 tons of waste are dumped into the Thames annually. That's the weight of about 50 elephants for those keeping score at home. And while the math might be impressive, the smell is decidedly not. Imagine an all-you-can-smell buffet of decay, the kind of aroma that sticks to your clothes and follows you home. The environmental impact doesn't stop at the fish. The river's state has a ripple effect, pun intended, on the city's commerce. Waterborne trade is crucial for London, but navigating a river that's more sludge than stream presents its own set of challenges. Barges and boats struggle against the current, not so much a flow as a reluctant oozing. The merchants, ever adaptive, find ways to cope, but it's a far cry from the idealized image of bustling trade routes. And then there's the human element, the folks whose livelihoods depend on the river. The fishermen who once cast their nets with confidence now find themselves competing with the city's refuse. It's a tough gig, trying to make a living when your primary resource is literally drowning in waste. Some turn to other trades, while others stubbornly cling to their nets, hoping for a change in tide, literally and metaphorically. Of course, there's a certain romantic allure to the Thames, a legend that persists despite the reality. It's the stuff of ballads and tales, a river that winds its way through history as a symbol of life and prosperity. But as you stand by its banks, the truth is harder to ignore. The river might be part of London's legend, but it's also part of its grimy reality. Why, you might wonder, does the city allow this to happen? It's not like medieval Londoners were oblivious to the state of their river, but much like the sanitation laws, or lack thereof, enforcement is more of a suggestion than a reality. The city's priorities lie elsewhere, focusing on trade and defence rather than environmental stewardship. After all, what's a little filth when there are goods to be moved and taxes to be collected? Yet, amidst the grime, there's a resilience that's hard to deny. The people of London, from the fishermen to the traders, adapt and endure, finding ways to thrive in a world that's anything but pristine. The river, for all its faults, is a part of their lives, a constant presence that shapes their reality, for better or worse. So, as you gaze out over the Thames, remember that this river is as much a part of London's story as its grandest castles or bloodiest battles. It's a testament to the city's ability to endure, even when faced with a tide of waste. And while the legends might paint a picture of a river as a symbol of prosperity, the reality is far more complex and infinitely more human. As you peel away from the sight of the Thames, with its stubbornly stagnant waters, you'd think the city's less than charming aroma might relent. But no, London's just getting started. With the afternoon sun casting a dubious glow over the city, it's time to seek refuge from the chaos in one of the local taverns. These are the medieval social hubs, where the ale flows and the gossip is even more intoxicating than the drink. But before you romanticize these watering holes as the cosy heart of London's social life, let's delve into the reality, because it's not all clinking mugs and merry tunes. Picture this, the alehouse, a staple of medieval life, a place where class distinctions blur and everybody, from the mud-caked peasant to the slightly less mud-caked artisan, can share a bench. But before you raise your mug to toast this egalitarian vibe, remember, the ale you're sipping might be more of a gamble than a treat. You see, water in medieval London is, let's say, unreliable. With the Thames doubling as a refuse repository, it's no wonder that ale becomes the safer bet. Fermentation kills off most nasties, but not all. And yet, people flock to these alehouses, perhaps trusting in the old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Or maybe it's just that the ale is the only thing strong enough to make life's more pungent realities bearable. A pint of ale fetches about a penny, which seems reasonable until you consider that it's also about the daily wage of a labourer. So, you could say the price of a pint is both a financial and a literal gut check. These taverns are more than just places to drink. They're the medieval equivalent of Facebook, Twitter and Reddit all rolled into one. News travels faster here than a horse-drawn cart can manage. But it's not just news and ale being exchanged. Disease, too, finds a cosy home in these dimly lit rooms, where the air is thick with conversation and contagion. In a world where germ theory is as foreign as a smartphone, the concept of personal space doesn't really exist. People gather close, sharing stories and, unwittingly, pathogens. The church, ever the moral compass, attempts to step in, urging cleanliness as a path to godliness. But in a city where dirt is as common as cobblestones, this is a Sisyphean task. While the church does its best to enforce public health measures, they're about as effective as a paper shield in a rainstorm. The clergy push for regulations on waste disposal and encourage bathing, but with little enforcement and an ingrained cultural acceptance of filth, they're fighting an uphill battle. Plus, let's face it, in a world where bathing is seen as a once-in-a-while luxury, their pleas often fall on unwashed ears. Economics play a pivotal role in this grimy tableau. The alehouses are bustling not just because of the ale or the camaraderie, but because they're the places where business happens. Deals are struck and partnerships formed over mugs of ale that might have seen better days. For many, the tavern is an office, a meeting room, and a break room all in one. After all, where else can you negotiate the price of a bushel of apples while sidestepping the remnants of last night's revelry? But let's not be too harsh on medieval Londoners. In a time when life expectancy hovers around 30 to 35 years, with the plague and various other delightful diseases lurking around every corner, people have bigger concerns than a bit of muck. Dirt is a constant, an inescapable part of life, and people are adept at navigating it. They've got places to be, deals to make, and lives to live, filth be damned. And so, as you sip your dubious ale in the dim light of a medieval tavern, you come to appreciate the tenacity of these people who thrive despite their less than sterile surroundings. The taverns are alive with the clamour of voices, the clink of mugs, and the occasional bout of raucous laughter. It's a scene that's both timeless and fleeting, a testament to the resilience of human spirit in the face of adversity. As the afternoon wears on and the tavern fills with more patrons seeking respite from the chaotic city streets, it becomes apparent that this is not just a place to drink. It's a microcosm of medieval London itself, a place where the realities of life, harsh, dirty, and unpredictable, are met with humour, camaraderie, and the occasional questionable decision. So, as you contemplate ordering another round, remember that in this world of grit and grime, the tavern stands as a beacon of human connection. It's a reminder that even in the midst of dirt and disease, people find a way to come together, to share stories, to laugh, and to live. And while the legends might paint a picture of merry gatherings and hearty laughter, the reality is a bit more complex and infinitely more human. As the shadows lengthen and the city's ever-present aroma intensifies, you realize that in medieval London, survival is as much about community as it is about endurance. As the shadows lengthen and the city's ever-present aroma intensifies, you realize that, in medieval London, survival is as much about community as it is about endurance. And as you step out of the tavern into the twilight, you're greeted by a city that's winding down, or at least as much as a city like London ever does. The streets are still alive with people hurrying home, the occasional clatter of hooves, and the ever-present hum of urban life. But this isn't just any evening. It's a moment to reflect on the city's peculiar charm and persistent filth. We've spent the day ambling through a London that's as much myth as muck, where the allure of chivalry and grandeur tangles with the reality of mud and stench. It's a place where survival is an art form, where the people are as tough as the cobblestones beneath their feet. This city, for all its faults and fragrances, is a testament to human resilience. And it's this resilience that sets the stage for eventual reform. Fast forward a few centuries, and London's dirtiness becomes the catalyst for change. The city's struggle with filth eventually forces it to evolve, to think beyond the immediate needs of trade and defence. Enter the 19th century, where the Great Stink of 1858, yes, it was so bad it got its own name, becomes a turning point. Joseph Bazalgetta steps in with his revolutionary sewer system, finally giving the Thames a break and the city a breath of fresh air, or at least fresher. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Back in the 14th century, environmental stewardship is about as popular as a cold bath. Yet, the seeds of change are being planted, albeit slowly. The city's sheer growth and the constant press of humanity ensure that the need for reform cannot be ignored forever. It's a slow burn, but eventually the mess becomes impossible to overlook, even for the most nostril-blind of city officials. Now, let's debunk a few myths while we're at it. Medieval life is often romanticized as a time of gallant knights and fair maidens, where every street corner hides a troubadour ready to break into song. But the reality is far grittier. Those knights, probably more concerned with rusting armour than rescuing damsels. The damsels, likely too busy dodging chamber pot contents to swoon gracefully. Yet the romantic appeal persists, tempting us with visions of a simpler, purer time. Ah, nostalgia, history's rose-tinted glasses, As night truly falls, casting a cloak over the city's less than picturesque elements, we're reminded of the lasting legacy of medieval London's struggles. The city's grime and grit, its resilience in the face of adversity, lay the groundwork for the modern metropolis we know today. The challenges of medieval sanitation pave the way for innovations that'll one day make urban life not just bearable, but thriving. And here's the kicker. Modern cities, despite all our advances, still grapple with some of the same issues. Sure, we've traded chamber pots for plumbing and open sewers for underground systems, but urban growth, pollution, and waste management remain thorny problems. It's a sobering thought that perhaps we're not as far removed from our medieval ancestors as we'd like to believe. The struggle to balance prosperity with cleanliness, growth with sustainability, is a tale as old as the city itself. So, as you stand there, contemplating the legacy of a city that's both grimy and grand, remember that history isn't just a series of dates and events. It's a living, breathing narrative shaped by the people who lived it. London's dirtiness is more than just an olfactory challenge. It's a reminder of the human capacity to adapt, to innovate, and to endure. In the end, medieval London is a city of contrasts, a place where the splendor of the past mingles with the squalor of reality. It's a living museum of history, where every street and alley tells a story of resilience and grit. The legends might gloss over the less savory details, but the reality is far more compelling. It's a story of survival, of people making do with what they have, and of a city that refuses to be tamed. As you turn to leave this historical journey, remember that the past is never truly past. It lingers in the air, in the stones of the city, and in the stories we tell. And while we might romanticize the medieval world, it's the gritty reality that truly captivates and teaches us something about the human spirit. After all, history is a mirror, reflecting not just where we've been, but where we might be headed. So, here's to medieval London, smelly, stubborn, and strangely inspiring. Cheers. In the bustling streets of ancient Sumer, where the wheel was a fresh innovation and clay tablets were the hottest tech, religion wasn't just a part of life. It was the entire operating system. If you thought your calendar was packed, the Sumerians had you beat. Their religious ceremonies were a constant whirlwind of offerings, rituals, and an ever-expanding pantheon of gods, each with more job titles than you could shake a stylus at. The origins of Sumerian religion go way back, and we mean way back, to around 3500 BCE. This was a time when the idea of the divine was inseparable from the land itself. The rivers, the fertile plains, and the occasional flood that reminded everyone who was really in charge. Sumer, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, was essentially the start-up hub of the ancient world, with gods fulfilling roles that would make any modern multitasker sweat. Let's talk deities. The Sumerians had a god for everything. Anu was the sky god, essentially the CEO of the divine boardroom. He wasn't clocking in for overtime, but his presence loomed large over the daily grind. Then there was Enlil, the wind god, who doubled as the god of storms and was, frankly, as unpredictable as the weather he controlled. Enki, the god of water and wisdom, might have been the more laid-back type. Think of him as the chill IT guy who knows how to fix everything when it breaks. Inanna, the goddess of love, war and political power, talk about a diverse portfolio, was not someone you'd want to cross. Her influence was as potent as a double espresso on a Monday morning. And then there's Utu, the sun god, who had the delightful task of lighting up the world every day. These deities weren't just figures of worship, they were entities whose favour you needed to survive the next flood, or ensure your crops didn't spontaneously decide to take a gap year. Now, where did all this divine action go down? Enter the ziggurat, those massive, tiered structures that dominated the Sumerian skyline. These weren't just architectural feats, they were spiritual skyscrapers, bridging the gap between earth and the heavens. Imagine if the Empire State Building had a hotline to the gods. Yeah, it was kind of like that. Each city had its own ziggurat, dedicated to the local patron deity, and the priests who ran these temples wielded power that would make even the most ambitious of modern-day influencers green with envy. But don't be fooled into thinking it was all incense and prayers. These ceremonies were serious business. Offerings were made, not just out of devotion, but out of necessity. You wanted Enlil to blow a little less wind and a little more prosperity your way? Better bring your A-game with those sacrifices. Livestock, grains, and the occasional lavish feast laid out for the gods were all part of maintaining cosmic favor. And the priests? They were the original middlemen, ensuring the gods got their due while keeping a little something aside for temple upkeep, or maybe just a new set of robes. The ziggurats themselves were marvels of engineering, constructed from sun-baked bricks that were stacked with a precision that would do a modern-day architect proud. These structures weren't just about size, they were about signaling a community's devotion and its place in the divine order. The higher the ziggurat, the closer to the sky, and presumably to the god's good graces. It was a bit like building a Wi-Fi tower in the hopes of better celestial reception. The Sumerians' devotion to their gods was not just spiritual, but deeply practical. In a world where the next harvest or the next invasion could make or break a city, having a divine ally was as crucial as having a good harvest. The gods were woven into the fabric of daily life, their whims interpreted by priests whose power rivaled that of kings. And these ceremonies, as chaotic and colourful as they were, cemented the social order, reminding everyone that even in the cradle of civilization, the divine held the upper hand. So, next time you're juggling a packed schedule, spare a thought for the Sumerians. Their gods didn't just watch from on high, they were in the thick of it, shaping destinies and demanding attention in a way that makes modern multitasking look like child's play. And as the sun set behind the towering ziggurats, casting long shadows over the land, the Sumerians could rest easy, knowing they'd done their part to keep the cosmic balance. A delicate dance of devotion and duty, with a side of divine drama. In the twilight of ancient Sumer, as the shadows of the towering ziggurats stretched across the land, another force was at play behind the scenes, one that wielded the power of gods and the savvy of politicians. Into the priestly class, the true maestros of divine communication and, let's be honest, the original influencers in a world without Wi-Fi. Imagine them as the ancient world's PR team, managing the brand of divinity with a flair that would make any modern social media strategist envious. These priests weren't just the keepers of spiritual rituals, they were the stewards of Sumer's economic engine. Picture this. Every time a sheep was sacrificed or a bushel of grain was offered, the priests ensured the gods got their share, while they handled the logistics. And by logistics, I mean keeping a little something on the side for temple renovations, or perhaps just for a new set of ceremonial bling. After all, who wouldn't want to look their best when hobnobbing with Anu and Enki? But don't be fooled by the incense and chanting. The priest's power extended into the very fabric of Sumerian society. They controlled the narrative with the dexterity of a modern-day spin doctor, ensuring that every flood, drought, or plague had a divine reason and a corresponding ceremony to fix it. This wasn't just about keeping the gods happy, it was about maintaining order and control. In a world where the next harvest was a roll of the cosmic dice, it paid to have the priests on your side. Let's not forget the economics. The temples functioned like ancient banks, with the priests as the original financial advisors. They collected offerings that could put modern crowdfunding campaigns to shame. In fact, the temple of Inanna in Uruk reportedly amassed wealth that would make even the wealthiest ancient kings raise an eyebrow. Cows, barley, textiles, you name it, the priests had it, stored away in temple granaries and storerooms that could rival the stockrooms of a major retailer. And speaking of wealth, let's talk about the temple economy. The temples were not just religious centers, but bustling hubs of commerce. They owned fields, managed herds, and employed a workforce that included everyone from farmers to artisans. In essence, the temples were the heart of Sumer's economic life, and the priests were its pulse. They were the ones who decided which fields to plant, which crafts to support, and how to distribute the resources, a power that was as intoxicating as it was practical. But the priesthood wasn't just about wealth and power. It was about legacy. Priesthoods were often hereditary, passed down like a prized family heirloom. Imagine being born into a role where your job description included everything from spiritual advisor to economic strategist. It was a position of prestige and influence, but also one of immense responsibility. After all, if the crops failed or the city was overrun by invaders, guess who was first in line for blame? Now, let's debunk a few myths. The Sumerian priests weren't just mystical figures floating above the fray. They were deeply embedded in the political and social machinations of their cities. They had alliances to maintain, rivalries to navigate, and, yes, even scandals to manage. If you think modern politics is a Game of Thrones, you haven't seen anything until you've glanced at the maneuverings within the temple precincts of Ur or Lagash. In fact, the priests' influence was so pervasive that some historians argue they were the true power behind the thrones, the puppeteers pulling the strings of kings who ostensibly ruled by divine right. After all, who better to interpret the will of the gods than those who claimed a direct line to them? It was a neat trick, really. 1 part divine mandate, 2 parts savvy politicking. So, next time you hear about the lavish ceremonies and grandiose rituals of ancient Sumer, remember the priests behind the curtain. They were the ones who orchestrated the show, ensuring that both gods and mortals played their parts to perfection. They were the original multitaskers in a world where divine favor was the ultimate currency, and they wielded it with a deftness that was as impressive as it was enduring. As the sun set on another day in Sumer, casting its golden hue over the land, the priests could rest assured that their place in the social order was secure. They were the gatekeepers of the divine, the stewards of the economy and the influences of their age, their power echoing through the millennia like the chants of their ancient rites. And in this delicate balance of devotion and duty, they stood, ever vigilant, ever influential, in the cradle of civilization. As the sun set on another day in Sumer, casting its golden hue over the land, the priests could rest assured that their place in the social order was secure. But as dawn broke, the Sumerians weren't just waking up to another day of divine duty and priestly politicking. Oh no, they were gearing up for one of the most epic parties the ancient world had ever seen, the Akitu festival. Think of it as the OG New Year's bash, complete with rituals that would make even the most seasoned party planners take notes. Now, if you think your New Year's Eve plans are elaborate, buckle up. The Akitu festival was a 12-day extravaganza that made Mardi Gras look like a neighborhood block party. Held at the start of the Babylonian calendar in the spring, around the vernal equinox, this festival was essentially a cosmic reboot, a chance to ensure the universe was running smoothly for another year. And it was no small affair. We're talking about the entire city of Babylon grinding to a halt so everyone could join in. The festival kicked off with a bang, literally. The first few days were about purification, which is ancient speak for cleaning up the city and getting rid of any bad juju. Temples were scrubbed clean, offerings were made, and rituals were performed to cleanse the space and the people. It was like a divine spring cleaning, except instead of dust bunnies, they were sweeping away existential dread. If only we could do the same with our email inboxes, right? Once the city was squeaky clean, the festival really got going. Central to the proceedings was the ritual humiliation of the king, a practice that sounds bizarre today, but made perfect political sense back then. Picture this. The king, stripped of his regalia, stood before the statue of Marduk, the chief god of Babylon, and was slapped by the high priest. Yes, slapped. The idea was to strip the king of his earthly power, reminding him, and everyone else, that the gods were the real MVPs here. It was a humbling experience, but also a way to reaffirm the king's divine mandate. After all, what better way to ensure loyalty than by publicly reminding everyone where your power really came from? And then there was the procession, a grand parade that saw the statue of Marduk paraded through the streets, accompanied by priests, musicians, and the entire city's worth of citizens. It was like the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade, but with more divine gravitas and fewer oversized balloons. This wasn't just spectacle, it was a show of unity and devotion, a chance for everyone to see and be seen in the eyes of the gods. But why go through all this trouble, you ask? Well, besides the obvious religious devotion, there was a hefty dose of politics and economics at play. The Akitu festival was a chance for the ruling class to reaffirm their power and for the city to display its wealth and prosperity. It was a public relations coup, showcasing Babylon as a stable, prosperous, and pious city. Something that mattered a great deal in a world where alliances and rivalries were as volatile as the Tigris in flood season. On the economic front, the festival was a boon for everyone, from merchants to artisans. Imagine the influx of goods and services needed to host a 12-day party for an entire city. Textile workers, bakers, brewers, everyone had a role to play, and the economic wheels spun with a fervour that would make Black Friday look quaint. It was a time when wealth flowed freely, and even the most modest of citizens could partake in the bounty. Yet, behind all the pomp and ceremony, there was a harsh reality. The Akitu festival was as much about control as it was about celebration. By bringing the city to a standstill, the ruling elite could reinforce their grip on power, ensuring that everyone from the king down to the lowliest farmer knew their place in the social hierarchy. The gods were watching, the priests were orchestrating, and the people were participating, each playing their part in a finely tuned dance that kept the cosmic order intact. Now, let's debunk a romantic notion or two. The idea that these festivals were purely religious is a lovely thought, but it misses the mark. Sure, the Sumerians were deeply devout, but they were also pragmatic to the core. The Akitu festival was as much about earthly power dynamics as it was about celestial devotion. It was a time to renew political alliances, settle debts, and, let's be honest, to remind everyone who was really in charge. It was a masterclass in ancient statecraft, wrapped in the guise of religious fervour. As the festival drew to a close, the city slowly returned to its daily grind. The king, freshly slapped and newly recrowned, resumed his duties with a renewed mandate. The citizens, buoyed by the festivities, got back to the business of living, farming, and trading. But the echoes of the Akitu festival lingered, a reminder of the delicate balance between the divine and the mundane, between power and piety. So, next time you're nursing a New Year's hangover, spare a thought for the Sumerians. They were partying long before champagne toasts and midnight kisses were a thing, blending business with pleasure in a way that was as strategic as it was celebratory. And while the Akitu festival may be a relic of the past, its lessons in power, politics, and the human need for renewal are as relevant today as they were in the days of Marduk and his merry band of deities. And speaking of the Sumerians, let's dive into something that might make your modern-day tarot reading seem quaint, the ancient art of divination. In Sumer, if you were hoping for a glimpse of the future, you didn't just shuffle a deck of cards, you cracked open a goat. Yes, that's right, animal liver reading was practically a 9-to-5 gig. They took their fortune-telling seriously, and by seriously, I mean they had an entire job description for the role, the baru or seer. These folks were the ancient equivalent of weather apps, stock market analysts, and psychics all rolled into one, except their forecasts involved a lot more entrails. The Sumerians believed that the gods communicated through the world around them, and what better way to get the divine download than a good old-fashioned liver reading? Before you wrinkle your nose, consider the practicality. Livers were abundant, thanks to all those sacrifices, and their complex structure provided a canvas that would make even the most abstract artist envious. The baru were trained specialists, interpreting every bump, lobe, and discoloration like a map to the cosmos. They even had liver models made of clay to help train newbies. Talk about commitment to the craft. But why such a fascination with livers, you ask? The liver was seen as the seat of life and intelligence, the organ that connected humanity to the divine will. The baru would scrutinize it like a detective at a crime scene, seeking patterns and omens that could predict everything from the outcome of battles to the success of harvests. It was a high-stakes game, and the baru were the ultimate players, wielding influence that could sway kings and shape policies. Now, if you think livers were the end of it, hold on to your hats. Sumerian divination was an expansive field. Omens were everywhere, from the flight pattern of birds to the way oil floated on water. Each sign was a message from the gods, decoded by the keen eyes of the baru. And if animal guts weren't your thing, you could always try dream interpretation. The Sumerians had a whole lexicon of dream symbols, a precursor to your modern-day dream dictionaries. If a king dreamt of a lion, it wasn't just a random nightmare, it was a warning, a call to action, and possibly an excuse to beef up palace security. Magic, too, wove its way through the fabric of Sumerian life, a dance between the seen and unseen. The Sumerians wielded spells like a modern-day lawyer wields contracts. These spells were not just hocus-pocus, they were pragmatic tools to ward off evil, protect the home, and win favor in love and war. They're even thought to have had a spell for hangovers. Now that's a magic trick we could all get behind. Clay tablets inscribed with these spells have been unearthed, revealing a world where the mystical and the mundane walked hand in hand. But let's not romanticize it too much. The world of magic and divination was as much about control as it was about belief. In a society where the next harvest could mean the difference between feast and famine, Having a seer on your side was like having the ultimate insurance policy. The Baru could make or break a ruler's reputation. Their readings were the ancient equivalent of a news headline. And while the idea of reading livers might sound bizarre, it was grounded in a relentless pursuit of understanding, a way to bring a semblance of order to an unpredictable world. And here's where we bust a myth or two. The romantic notion of seers as mystical sages, detached from earthly concerns? Not quite. The Baru were deeply entrenched in the political machinery of their cities, wielding power that could rival even the most influential priests. They were advisors, strategists, and, let's be honest, a bit of a wild card in the grand game of Sumerian power dynamics. A favourable reading could boost a ruler's standing, while a dire prediction could rally armies or incite rebellions. This isn't to say that it was all smoke and mirrors. The belief in omens and magic was as real to the Sumerians as gravity is to us. It was a lens through which they viewed the world, a framework that connected them to the divine realm. It's easy to scoff at the idea of liver reading, but consider this. In an era without scientific explanations for natural phenomena, divination offered answers, a way to navigate the chaos of existence. It was both a comfort and a tool, a blend of faith and pragmatism that shaped the destiny of individuals and empires alike. And let's not overlook the economics. Just like priests, the Baru had their own hustle. Their services didn't come cheap, and those who could afford a personal Baru ensured their place in the social hierarchy. The diviners were a crucial part of the Sumerian economy, as indispensable as any trader or craftsman. Their insights were a commodity, a whisper from the gods that could be bought and sold, shaping markets and lives with a single reading. So, next time you catch a glimpse of your horoscope or consider a tarot reading, spare a thought for the Sumerians. They were divining the future long before crystal balls were a thing, using methods that might seem alien today but were grounded in a deep, abiding need to understand the world. In the dance of Sumerian life, where gods and mortals moved in a delicate balance of power and belief, the art of divination was a vital step, a reminder that even in the cradle of civilization, the future was always just a goat's liver away. And speaking of goat's livers, let's not forget how the Sumerians' penchant for divination didn't just stay in Mesopotamia. Like a catchy tune you can't get out of your head, their rituals and beliefs found their way into the cultures that followed. Fast forward a few centuries, and their influence is still going strong. The Babylonians, for instance, took Sumerian practices and gave them a new twist. They expanded on the celestial observations, creating a zodiac that would eventually shape astrology as we know it today. You can thank them next time you check your horoscope to see if Mercury is in retrograde. The Sumerians laid the groundwork for a religious framework that didn't just vanish with time, but evolved, much like a phone's operating system getting constant updates. Their pantheon of gods and rituals influenced the Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians, who each left their own mark on these traditions. It's like a game of cultural telephone, where each civilization added its own flair while keeping the core message intact. You could say the Sumerians were the original cultural influences, and their brand had some serious staying power. But why did these practices endure? The answer lies in their pragmatic approach to religion. The Sumerians didn't just worship their gods, they integrated them into every aspect of life, from politics to economics. This holistic view made their religious system flexible and adaptable, capable of weathering the changes brought by new rulers and shifting power dynamics. In a world where the only constant was change, often abrupt and violent, such adaptability was key to survival. Take the concept of ziggurats. These towering structures weren't just relics of a bygone era, they became templates for the future. The idea of a sacred space elevated to bridge the earthly with the divine found echoes in the pyramids of Egypt and the temples of Mesoamerica. They were the ancient skyscrapers, ambitious feats of engineering that proclaimed, "We're here and we mean business." They signified both a devotion to the gods and a testament to human ingenuity, a dual purpose that resonated across time and space. This brings us to the real magic trick, how the Sumerian way of life gives us a mirror to our own. Sure, we might not be reading goat livers or slapping kings around these days, but the essence of mixing the divine with the daily grind is alive and well. Just look at how religion and politics continue to intertwine, how rituals persist in modern ceremonies, from inaugurations to marriages. And let's not forget the economic angle. Ancient temples were the original community hubs, much like today's marketplaces or the internet. And here's a fun twist. The Sumerians' obsession with the divine isn't all that different from our modern-day fixation with technology. Think about it. Both offer a way to connect with something greater than ourselves. Both promise answers to life's big questions, and both require a certain level of devotion. Just as the ancient Sumerians consulted their priests and diviners, we now turn to algorithms and AI to make sense of the world. It's as if we've traded one form of omnipotence for another. But let's not get too carried away with romanticism. The Sumerians weren't perfect, and neither are we. Their system, while innovative, was also a means of control. The ziggurats might have been wonders of the world, but they were also symbols of power, reminding everyone who was in charge. The priests, with their dual roles as spiritual leaders and economic managers, wielded influence that kept the social hierarchy firmly in place. Sound familiar? It's a tale as old as time, one that continues to play out in boardrooms and government offices around the world. Yet, in acknowledging their flaws, we can also appreciate their achievements. The Sumerians were pioneers, setting the stage for civilizations to come. Their religious ceremonies, as complex and multifaceted as they were, offer insight into the human condition, a blend of faith, pragmatism, and the eternal quest for meaning. They remind us that, despite the millennia that separate us, the fundamental questions of existence remain the same. How do we make sense of the unknown? How do we navigate the chaos of life? And, perhaps most importantly, how do we find our place within it all? In the grand tapestry of history, the Sumerians are more than just a footnote. They're the opening act, the ones who set the stage for the civilizations that followed. Their legacy is woven into the fabric of our world, a testament to the enduring power of human creativity and resilience. As we reflect on their contributions, we're reminded that history isn't just about dates and events. It's about the stories and ideas that shape who we are. So next time you find yourself in a moment of ritual, whether it's a wedding, a graduation, or even just a daily routine, spare a thought for the Sumerians. They were the original architects of ceremony, blending the sacred with the secular in a way that continues to resonate. And in doing so, they remind us that while the players and settings may change, the dance of devotion and duty endures. In the end, it's all part of the grand narrative of humanity, a story as old as civilization itself, constantly evolving yet timeless in its essence. If you ever thought Instagram influencers had mastered the art of visual obsession, think again. The Byzantine Empire was the original master of the image game, long before selfies and filters were even a glimmer in humanity's eye. We're diving into a world where religious icons weren't just revered, they were practically worshipped more than any internet star with a blue checkmark. Let's talk icons. A staple of Byzantine life that was part spirituality, part politics, and a whole lot of drama. First things first, what exactly is an icon? In the Byzantine context, these weren't just any old paintings. Icons were religious images, usually depicting Christ, the Virgin Mary, or various saints, meticulously crafted on wood panels. Think of them as the ancient world's answer to those high-end art pieces that people pretend to understand in modern galleries. But unlike your average canvas, icons were believed to hold a spiritual presence. These images weren't just art. They were the divine in 2 dimensions. In today's terms, it's like having a direct line to your favorite celebrity, except, holier. Now, before we get too cozy in the divine aesthetics, let's acknowledge that the Byzantine art scene was more cutthroat than a reality TV show elimination round. The power struggles in this era could make the most dramatic season of The Bachelor look like a tea party. Emperor Justinian I, for instance, wasn't just a fan of icons, he was a key player in the Byzantine power game, a game where art, religion, and politics were tangled tighter than a Game of Thrones plotline. Justinian, who ruled from 527 to 565 AD, wasn't just any emperor. He was one of the most ambitious rulers of the Byzantine Empire. Known for his slick administration and military campaigns, he also had a taste for architectural grandeur, commissioning the Hagia Sophia, a church that would make even the most jaded of travellers gasp. But why, you ask, was there such a fuss over these religious doodles? Well, Icons were more than just a way to prettify the empire's many churches. They were political chess pieces. Imagine this. A religious image hanging in a church could sway the masses more effectively than a viral tweet. Icons were a way to communicate theological ideas to the largely illiterate population, and they were everywhere. Churches, monasteries, even private homes. It was like having a little piece of the divine in your living room, watching over your daily goings-on. And here's where the plot thickens. The Byzantines weren't just hoarding these icons for aesthetic appeal. They believed these images could perform miracles. Yes, you heard that right. Icons were credited with healing the sick, protecting cities from invasions, and even influencing the weather. Talk about a multifunctional art piece. But this belief in the miraculous power of icons wasn't just a quirky side note. It was a reflection of the deeply ingrained religious mindset of the time. Let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer volume of icons being churned out during this period. In the height of Byzantium's icon craze, it seemed like nearly every surface was adorned with these holy images. Monks, artists, and craftsmen were working tirelessly to meet the demand, almost like an ancient assembly line geared towards divine production. The effort was massive. Hundreds, if not thousands, of icons were created, each one painstakingly detailed to meet theological standards. However, not everyone was on board with this icon mania. Enter the iconoclasts, a group that saw the veneration of icons as nothing short of idolatry, which was a big no-no in the biblical commandments. They argued that people were worshipping the images instead of what they represented. In the 8th and 9th centuries, this tension boiled over into the iconoclast controversy, a series of religious debates that were as fiery as any modern-day Twitter spat. The controversy split the empire, leading to bouts of icon smashing and the persecution of those who dared to defend these sacred images. Picture an art heist, but instead of stealing, the Vandals were destroying the very things they believed were corrupting the faith. Despite the chaos, icons remained a crucial part of Byzantine society. They were, in a way, the Facebook pages of the time, public profiles that communicated one's beliefs and social standing. Owning an icon showed not just piety, but also a certain level of wealth and influence. It was a status symbol, a spiritual asset, and a political statement all rolled into one. And like any good social media post, it was subject to scrutiny, debate, and sometimes outright hostility. The Byzantine Empire's relationship with iconography tells us more than just its artistic preferences. It reveals a society deeply intertwined with its religious convictions and political machinations. This wasn't just about pretty pictures on walls. Icons were a battleground for ideology, power, and faith. They were the silent witnesses to the empire's triumphs and tribulations, a testament to a culture that understood the power of image long before hashtags and viral content. So next time you scroll through a perfectly curated Instagram feed, spare a thought for the Byzantines, the original masters of image management. Just as the Byzantines were perfecting their iconography game, along came the 8th century with its own brand of party pooper, the iconoclast controversy. Now, if you thought medieval disputes were all about knights and castles, think again. This was a showdown over religious images that could rival any modern-day tech debate. It was like someone decided to smash all smartphones because they believed people were worshipping the gadgets instead of using them for calls. Enter Emperor Leo III, a ruler who took a sledgehammer both literally and metaphorically to this frenzy of icon veneration. Leo III, the Isaurian, began his reign in 707 AD and soon found himself neck-deep in a theological storm that would have Twitter trending for days if it existed back then. The man had a knack for stirring the pot, and in 726 AD he issued a decree that would make any art lover cringe, the prohibition of religious icons. Leo wasn't just being contrarian. He had strong convictions rooted in the belief that the veneration of these icons bordered on idolatry. He saw them as a distraction from true faith, a violation of the commandment against graven images. But let's not be naive. This was also a power play. Leo's iconoclastic policies weren't only about spiritual purity. They were a strategic move to consolidate power and assert control over the church, which was, let's face it, the medieval equivalent of a major political party. By stripping the icons of their divine status, Leo aimed to centralize religious authority under his imperial thumb. This wasn't just about smashing icons, It was about smashing the power structures that came with them. The economic implications? Oh, they were as juicy as a Byzantine feast. The production and sale of icons were big business. Artisans, monasteries, and the church itself profited handsomely from the creation and distribution of these religious images. By banning icons, Leo effectively cut off a significant revenue stream for these groups, redirecting economic control back to the state. It was a calculated move to tighten the empire's purse strings while shaking up the ecclesiastical establishment. But before you start picturing monks and artists storming the imperial palace with pitchforks, remember that not everyone was opposed to Leo's reforms. The iconoclasts, who believed that the veneration of icons was a slippery slope to idolatry, supported the emperor's actions. They were a vocal minority, but their influence was substantial, especially in regions like Asia Minor, where the iconoclastic sentiment took root. The social impact was as profound as the religious one. Families and communities found themselves divided over the issue, creating rifts that were as deep as any political divide today. Imagine the Thanksgiving table if half your relatives believed smartphones were tools of the devil. It was a classic case of ideology clashing with tradition, and the stakes were high. Despite the emperor's best efforts, the iconoclastic policies weren't universally popular. The church in Rome, led by the Pope, wasn't having any of it. They saw Leo's actions as an overreach of imperial power into spiritual affairs, something they weren't keen to endorse. This disagreement widened the already growing chasm between the eastern and western branches of Christianity, setting the stage for further conflicts down the line. Leo's son, Constantine V, carried the torch of iconoclasm with a zeal that would make even the most fervent reformers blush. His reign, lasting from 741 to 775 AD, was marked by aggressive campaigns against iconophiles, those who supported the use of icons. Constantine wasn't just content with issuing decrees, he wanted to purge the empire of all traces of icon veneration. Under his rule, monasteries were shuttered, religious leaders who opposed iconoclasm were persecuted, and the streets of Constantinople saw more icon smashings than your local electronics store during a Black Friday sale. Constantine's relentless pursuit of iconoclastic purity had its own set of consequences. While he may have been successful in temporarily suppressing the veneration of icons, his heavy-handed tactics also sowed resentment and resistance. The monasteries, once centers of icon production and veneration, became hotbeds of opposition. The monks, stripped of their iconographic livelihoods, found new purpose in preserving the traditions that Constantine sought to erase. They became the underground resistance, keeping the flame of icon veneration alive in secret. The iconoclast controversy was more than just an ecclesiastical squabble. It was a reflection of the broader societal tensions of the time. At its core, it was a battle over identity and authority, a struggle to define the soul of Byzantine Christianity. It was about who got to say what was sacred and who held the reins of power in a world where religion was inseparable from politics. Even as the iconoclasts wielded hammers and decrees, the icons themselves became symbols of resilience and defiance. They were the silent witnesses to an empire grappling with change, embodying the complex dance between faith, power, and resistance. So, while emperors like Leo III and Constantine V might have tried to erase them from the canvas of Byzantine life, the icons endured, etched into the very fabric of the empire's identity. And just like that, the Byzantine Empire found itself torn between two worlds, one that sought to preserve the past and another that pushed for reform. As the dust settled and the hammers fell silent, the echoes of this controversy would continue to shape the empire's future, paving the way for the next chapter in this tale of image and power. But for now, let's leave the icons to rest, knowing their story is far from over. Even as the Byzantine Empire wrestled with its identity, the defenders of iconography were gearing up for what could only be described as the ultimate theological smackdown. These iconophiles were the avengers of their time, minus the spandex, and they were determined to rescue their beloved images from the iconoclastic bonfire. Leading the charge was Empress Irene, a woman who knew how to wield power like a Byzantine Beyoncé. Irene wasn't just a fan of icons, she was a political mastermind, and she was ready to rewrite the script of this drama with a plot twist worthy of a soap opera. Now, Let's talk about the Second Council of Nicaea in 787 AD, which was basically the Comic-Con of church councils. It was here that the defenders of iconography made their triumphant comeback, and their mission was simple: to restore icons to their rightful place in Byzantine society. This was no small feat, considering the council had to reconcile the theological wreckage left by decades of iconoclastic policies. It was the ultimate PR campaign for the divine image, complete with debates, decrees, and a heaping dose of ecclesiastical flair. The council, convened by Empress Irene, was a gathering of religious heavyweights from across the empire. Picture it: bishops, abbots, and theologians, all under one roof, hashing out the finer points of icon veneration like a bunch of hipsters at an artisanal coffee convention. Their task? To determine once and for all whether icons were kosher in the eyes of the church, and they didn't just wing it, they had theological arguments sharper than a Byzantine dagger. The main takeaway from the council was a resounding yes to icons. Icons were deemed not only permissible but essential to Christian worship. The council decreed that these images were worthy of veneration, not for the material they were made of, but for the holy figures they represented. It was a victory for the iconophiles, and a massive comeback for religious artwork, ensuring that the divine image would remain a staple of Byzantine Christianity. The council's decision was like a spiritual mic drop, and the impact was felt across the empire. With the theological green light from Nicaea, icons returned to the Byzantine landscape with a vengeance. The monasteries, which had been the secret keepers of iconography during the dark days of iconoclasm, swung back into action like an ancient assembly line on steroids. They cranked out icons faster than you can say Byzantine bling, turning these spiritual commodities into the medieval equivalent of must-have merchandise. And let me tell you, these weren't your garden variety paintings. They were crafted with all the precision and care of a Swiss watch. Monasteries became the factories of faith, producing icons that adorned churches, homes, and even personal shrines. The demand was as insatiable as a modern-day Black Friday sale. If you thought Apple fans lined up for the latest iPhone, you should have seen the Byzantines lining up for their icons. This wasn't just about religious devotion, it was about economic survival. Icons became a cornerstone of the Byzantine economy, providing a steady stream of income for monasteries and artisans alike. The production of icons was a lucrative business, with monasteries acting like Silicon Valley startups, innovating and expanding their reach. They weren't just painting icons, they were exporting them across the empire and beyond, creating a network of trade that would make any modern-day CEO drool. The economic implications were significant. By the 9th century, icons were contributing to the empire's GDP in ways that would make even the most skeptical economist nod in approval. Icons became the ultimate status symbol, a way to showcase one's wealth and piety. Owning an icon wasn't just a sign of religious devotion, it was a social flex, a way to say, I've made it in the Byzantine world. It was like owning a Tesla, but with a halo. The more elaborate the icon, the higher the status of its owner. It was a world where art, faith, and commerce collided, creating a cultural cocktail that was as intoxicating as it was complex. Yet, amidst the religious fervour and economic boom, there was an undercurrent of tension. The restoration of icons didn't magically erase the scars of iconoclasm. The empire was still healing from the ideological rift that had split families and communities. The defenders of iconography might have won the battle, but the war for the soul of Byzantine Christianity was far from over. The council's decisions had to be implemented, and that required more than just decrees. It demanded diplomacy, negotiation, and a fair bit of old-fashioned political manoeuvring. Empress Irene, ever the savvy leader, understood this better than anyone. Her efforts to restore icons were part of a broader strategy to stabilize her reign and mend the fractured empire. She knew that the power of the image wasn't just in its ability to inspire faith, but in its potential to unite a divided people. By championing the cause of iconography, she was also asserting her authority, proving that she could steer the Byzantine ship through turbulent waters. Still, the path to reconciliation was rocky. Not everyone was thrilled with the council's decisions, and pockets of iconoclastic resistance lingered like a stubborn stain on a fresco. It was a reminder that in the Byzantine world nothing was ever simple. The restoration of icons was a victory, yes, but it was also a starting point for further debates and developments. The journey was far from over, and the Byzantine Empire was just getting started on its next chapter. As the empire moved forward, the legacy of the Second Council of Nicaea continued to shape its religious and cultural landscape. The defenders of iconography had succeeded in their quest, but their victory was not just about restoring images, it was about preserving a way of life. Icons had become more than just religious artifacts. They were a symbol of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of faith in a world where change was the only constant. And so, the Byzantine Empire, with its icons shining brightly, pressed on, navigating the complexities of its time with a blend of piety, politics, and a healthy dose of intrigue. The story of iconography was far from over, and the Byzantines were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. After all, in a world where the sacred and the secular danced a delicate waltz, the only certainty was that the show must go on. As the Byzantine Empire sashayed into its golden age of iconography, the art scene got as extravagant as a royal wedding cake, layers upon layers of opulence. Imagine icons so lavishly adorned, they could outshine the blingiest of modern-day Oscars outfits. This was a time when simple wood panels were transformed into spiritual Wi-Fi routers, connecting believers to the divine with the same fervor as a kid trying to catch a rare Pokemon. Now, let's dissect the artistry that took these icons from holy doodles to divine masterpieces. The technique of encaustic painting, using pigment mixed with hot wax, was as much an art as a chemistry experiment. Think about it. Artists had to keep the wax at just the right temperature to avoid it turning into a sticky nightmare. It was like baking a souffle while under the pressure of a Michelin-starred chef's gaze. This method was not just about aesthetics. It ensured the durability of the icons because nothing says eternal life like a painting that can withstand the test of time and humidity. Then there was the gilding, a process that turned these icons into shimmering pieces of heaven on earth. Gold leaf was applied so meticulously you'd think the artists were prepping for a space mission rather than a church wall. This wasn't just for show, though the glimmer certainly helped catch the eye. Gold was a symbol of divine light, making these icons a ticket to the heavenly VIP section. And let's not forget the gemstones. Yes, actual gemstones embedded in some icons, making them the Fabergé eggs of religious art. But who were these mysterious artists behind the masterpieces? Spoiler alert, most of them remain nameless. Imagine being the creative genius behind a viral meme and having no one know your Twitter handle. These artists were the unsung heroes of Byzantine culture, working in anonymity while leaving an indelible mark on art history. They were the silent partners in a divine collaboration, blending devotion with a dash of entrepreneurial flair. Speaking of entrepreneurship, let's talk about the economic impact of all this icon madness. The Byzantine art market was booming, with demand for icons skyrocketing faster than concert tickets for a surprise Beyoncé tour. Monasteries became the Silicon Valley of the Middle Ages, churning out icons like they were the latest tech gadgets. This wasn't just about spiritual fulfillment. It was about cold, hard cash. Icons were commodities, traded across the empire and beyond, contributing to a bustling economy that would make any Wall Street broker nod in appreciation. The artists and craftsmen weren't just artisans, they were savvy business operators. They understood market demand like the back of their paint-splattered hands, tailoring icons to suit the tastes and wallets of their patrons. A bespoke icon for a wealthy merchant? No problem. A simpler version for a humble farmer? They had that covered too. It was an exercise in market segmentation that would put modern-day marketers to shame. Yet, amidst all the splendor, let's not forget the elephant in the room, the potential for idolatry. While the Byzantines reveled in their icon-laden churches, critics whispered about the thin line between veneration and worship. It was a theological tightrope, one that required careful balancing. The church had to keep its flock focused on the divine message, not just the divine messenger. This was less about smashing idols, and more about ensuring the faithful didn't start treating icons like medieval celebrity crushes. In the grand tapestry of Byzantine society, icons were more than just religious objects, they were a cultural phenomenon. They represented a fusion of faith, art, and commerce, each thread woven tightly into the fabric of daily life. And while the Byzantine Empire was no stranger to political intrigue and theological debates, the golden age of iconography was a testament to its ability to innovate and adapt. As the empire continued to evolve, the legacy of its icons spread far beyond its borders. Byzantine art influenced cultures from the Mediterranean to the Slavic lands, leaving a stylistic fingerprint that can still be seen in Eastern Orthodox churches today. The Byzantines might have been the original masters of image management, but their impact was anything but ephemeral. It was a legacy as enduring as the icons themselves, a testament to the power of art to transcend time and space. So, while the Byzantines may have lived in a world fraught with challenges, they also inhabited a realm of stunning creativity and devotion. Their icons were more than just religious artifacts. They were a window into a civilization that understood the profound power of the image. And as we look back on this golden age, we are reminded that even amidst the grandeur and the glitter, the true beauty of Byzantine iconography lay in its ability to connect the earthly with the divine. In this era of artistic brilliance, the Byzantines weren't just creating icons, they were crafting a legacy. And as the empire continued its journey, the echoes of this golden age would resonate through history, offering a glimpse into a world where faith, art and commerce wove together a rich tapestry of cultural achievement. The story of Byzantine iconography was far from over, and its influence would continue to inspire and captivate for generations to come. As the Byzantine Empire tiptoed toward its inevitable curtain call, its once vaunted iconography found itself at a crossroads. The empire, much like a pop star past its prime, was struggling to maintain relevance in a rapidly changing world. By the 15th century, the empire had shrunk to a shadow of its former self, its territories reduced to a mere mosaic of what had once been a sprawling dominion. Yet, just like a classic 80s hit, Byzantine iconography refused to fade quietly into obscurity. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 was the final nail in the Byzantine coffin, the dramatic finale to an empire that had been in decline for centuries. But while the Ottomans stormed the city, the legacy of Byzantine art was already packing its bags, ready to embark on a post-Byzantine world tour. This art wasn't destined to gather dust in the annals of history. Instead, like a savvy influencer, it adapted to new contexts, spreading its stylistic fingerprints across Europe and beyond. Let's talk about the mechanics of this cultural migration. As the empire crumbled, Byzantine artists and artisans, much like skilled freelancers, took their talents on the road. These craftsmen found new patrons in places like Russia, where the Orthodox Church eagerly adopted Byzantine styles, ensuring that icons continued to grace churches with that signature golden glow. Russian iconography became the spiritual heir of Byzantine art, with Moscow's Kremlin acting like a cultural sponge, soaking up the aesthetic as if on a spiritual shopping spree. In Italy, the Renaissance swooped in with its own brand of artistic flair, yet it wasn't immune to the allure of Byzantine techniques. Italian painters like Duccio and Cimabue were inspired by the luminous quality of Byzantine icons, incorporating the gold backgrounds and stylized figures into their own works. It was like a cross-cultural collaboration, centuries before Spotify playlists and cross-genre hits. These influences helped lay the groundwork for the Renaissance's own golden age, proving that even as an empire fades, its cultural echoes can have a lasting impact. But here's where the myth meets reality. The so-called golden age of Byzantine art wasn't a continuous streak of uninterrupted brilliance. The Byzantines weren't painting masterpieces in a utopian bubble. They were navigating a world rife with political upheaval, economic constraints, and religious disputes. The romantic narrative of an empire wholly devoted to the pursuit of beauty glosses over the harsh realities of an empire in perpetual crisis mode. These artists weren't so much leisurely creating as they were innovating under pressure, producing icons with the urgency of a modern newsroom on a breaking news day. Economically, the Byzantine art scene was a complex web of patronage and commerce. Icons were high-value commodities, but they were also subject to the whims of market demand and political favor. As the empire weakened, the flow of wealth to artistic endeavors slowed, forcing artists to get creative with their resources. Think recycled wood panels and repurposed gold leaf. These artisans were the original masters of upcycling long before it became the darling of eco-conscious millennials. Even as the Byzantine influence spread, the art world grappled with its legacy, much like modern critics analyzing the impact of a once controversial artist. Byzantine art became a subject of fascination and bewilderment, leaving future art historians scratching their heads over its intricate symbolism and stylized forms. Was it purely religious devotion? Or was there a deeper, more subversive message hidden in those serene, otherworldly faces? The debate rages on, proving that the allure of Byzantine iconography is as enigmatic as it is enduring. So, what does all this mean for our understanding of art today? Byzantine iconography challenges us to reconsider the relationship between art, power, and faith. It reminds us that art isn't created in a vacuum, but is deeply intertwined with the social and political currents of its time. The Byzantine legacy teaches us that beauty can thrive amidst adversity, that art can be both a tool of devotion and a statement of defiance. As we wrap up this whirlwind tour of Byzantine iconography, let's spare a thought for those nameless artists who toiled in obscurity, crafting images that would outlive the very empire that spawned them. Their work was a testament to the enduring power of creativity in the face of chaos, a reminder that art can transcend the boundaries of time and place. The Byzantines might have exited the stage, but their icons continue to captivate and confound, a testament to the timeless dance between the earthly and the divine. And there you have it, the tale of Byzantine iconography, a saga of faith, art, and resilience that echoes through the ages. Whether you're an art historian, a casual observer, or just someone who appreciates a good story, the legacy of the Byzantine Empire offers a window into a world where images wielded power, and where art was as much about survival as it was about beauty. So next time you gaze upon an icon, remember the journey it took to get there, and the empire that, against all odds, left its mark on the canvas of history. If you ever wanted a masterclass in strategic audacity, look no further than Hannibal Barca, the man who took thinking outside the box to the level of thinking outside the mountain range. The name Hannibal conjures images of elephants lumbering over snowy peaks. But let's rewind a bit to understand how this Carthaginian general became Rome's worst nightmare. Born in 247 BC in the bustling city of Carthage, located in present-day Tunisia, Hannibal was a product of his times that were, let's say, less than peaceful. His father, Hamilcar Barca, was a big deal. Think CEO of Carthaginian military operations. After getting a rough deal from the First Punic War, Hamilcar was not exactly hosting dinner parties with Roman senators. Instead, he was busy nurturing a grudge against Rome that could have been bottled and sold as a family heirloom. Legend has it that Hamilcar made young Hannibal, only about 9 years old at the time, swear an oath to forever hate Rome. This was less of a cross my heart kind of promise and more of an eternal blood feud, commitment. So while most kids were learning to ride a bike, Hannibal was learning to loathe an empire. The First Punic War, from 264 to 241 BC, was essentially a 23-year-long argument over who got to boss around the Mediterranean. Carthage, with its naval prowess, went head-to-head with Rome, which was just getting its land legs. When the dust settled, Carthage was slapped with some serious reparations, 3,200 talents of silver over 10 years, and just as a reminder, 1 talent was about 71 pounds of silver. It was like being handed a bill for a mega yacht you didn't even get to sail. This financial strain meant Carthage had to tighten its belt, while Rome strutted away with Sicily, the Mediterranean's version of prime real estate. Hannibal grew up in this charged atmosphere, learning the art of war like other kids learned the alphabet. By his mid-20s he was already a seasoned soldier. But it wasn't just his military training that shaped him, it was the geopolitical drama playing out around him. Carthage's commercial empire was under constant threat from Rome's expanding ambitions, and it was clear to Hannibal that diplomacy was about as effective as a paper shield against a Roman sword. His family was practically a military dynasty. His brothers, Hasdrubal and Mago, were also key players in the Carthaginian army, making the Barca family the Carthaginian version of a military think tank. Carthage was a city that thrived on commerce, and the Barcas were like the board of directors, deciding not just how to protect it, but how to strike back at the Roman juggernaut. Let's talk about that famous elephant trek for a moment. Most people remember that because, let's face it, elephants aren't exactly known for their alpine skills. The whole idea was as audacious as it was insane, a logistical nightmare that would have given any modern military planner a headache. But for Hannibal, it was just Tuesday. Crossing the Alps with a multi-ethnic army and war elephants was his way of saying, "Hey Rome, bet you didn't see this coming." But this wasn't just about military flair. Hannibal understood that if Carthage was going to survive, it needed to hit Rome where it hurt, and that meant taking the fight to Italian soil. The Alps were a barrier that Rome thought insurmountable, and by crossing them, Hannibal wasn't just moving an army, he was making a statement. It was a strategic gamble that paid off spectacularly, at least in the short term. Hannibal's early life was a crucible of military and political education. He was groomed for leadership and warfare, not just by his father, but by the entire Carthaginian context, an empire struggling under the weight of indemnities and the shadow of Roman power. It was a school of hard knocks where the curriculum was survival and the exams were battles. And Hannibal graduated with honours, ready to challenge the Roman legions in ways they never expected. So, there you have it. Hannibal Barca, shaped by a legacy of enmity, trained in the art of war from childhood, and destined to take on the might of Rome in a way that would be remembered for millennia. But we're just getting started. There's more to Hannibal than elephants and mountains. Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the strategic mind of one of history's most fascinating figures. Just when you think Hannibal's story couldn't get any more adventurous, it takes a turn straight out of a blockbuster script. Let's set the stage. It's 218 BC, and our Carthaginian hero decides that the best way to crash the Roman party is by pulling an elephant-sized rabbit out of a hat crossing the Alps. Now, if you're thinking that trekking over a mountain range with 40,000 troops, 37 elephants, and enough supplies to rival a modern-day music festival sounds a bit bonkers, you're not wrong. But Hannibal was no ordinary general. He was a visionary with a flair for the dramatic. Start by considering the logistics. Moving an army is one thing. Moving an army with elephants is a logistical nightmare that would make even the most seasoned planners break out in a cold sweat. We're talking about trudging through treacherous terrain with snow, ice, and the kind of chilly wind that could freeze a Roman's toga right off. The terrain was so unforgiving that it claimed countless lives, reducing Hannibal's army by nearly half before even setting foot on Italian soil. That's right, 40,000 men set out, but only about 20,000 made it to the other side. And the elephants? Well, let's just say they weren't exactly frolicking in the snow like happy winter tourists. Imagine the chaos, soldiers slipping on icy paths, elephants struggling to keep their balance on narrow trails, all while dealing with hostile tribes who probably couldn't believe their luck at seeing this parade of madness unfold on their doorstep. It was like a bizarre circus act that no one had paid to see. The Alps, with their cruel and unpredictable weather, were an adversary in their own right, and Hannibal's gamble seemed more like a death wish than a strategic maneuver. But here's the kicker. While the trek was brutal, it wasn't just about getting to Italy, it was about the psychological impact. Rome thought itself untouchable, protected by the natural barriers that had kept invaders at bay for centuries. Hannibal's crossing was like a massive surprise, a moment that rattled Roman confidence to its core. Suddenly, the Romans had to deal with an unexpected visitor who didn't exactly RSVP to their war plans. In terms of psychological warfare, Hannibal was playing chess while Rome was still figuring out checkers. By showing up uninvited, he was sending a clear message: I'm here, and I'm not playing by your rules. It was a strategic mind game that left Rome scrambling. The shock value alone was enough to earn Hannibal a few points in the annals of military history. And let's not forget about those elephants, the ancient world's equivalent of a tank. While their effectiveness in battle was debatable, thanks to the fact that they were about as suited to alpine warfare as a penguin is to a desert, they served a crucial role in the psychological battle. Picture the Roman legions, accustomed to facing predictable human adversaries, suddenly confronted by these massive, trumpeting beasts. It was like being in a horror story where the monsters were both real and terrifyingly large. Hannibal's decision to cross the Alps was a testament to his audacity, but also to his understanding of warfare as theatre. It wasn't just about winning battles, it was about making statements. The Romans, who valued order and predictability, found themselves facing an enemy who was anything but. The sheer audacity of Hannibal's move was enough to unsettle even the most stoic Roman senator, and it forced Rome to rethink its strategies in ways they hadn't anticipated. Yet, for all its audacity, the crossing wasn't without its flaws. The price paid in human lives was staggering, and the elephants, majestic as they were, proved to be more of a burden than an asset in the freezing conditions. Hannibal's gamble was a mix of brilliance and folly, a testament to his willingness to push the boundaries of what was thought possible. In the end, it was a move that would go down in history as both a daring feat and a cautionary tale about the limits of ambition. In the grand chessboard of the Second Punic War, Hannibal's Alpine Gambit was a knight's leap over mountains, a move that redefined the rules of engagement. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare, a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected moves are the ones that leave the biggest mark. But the story of Hannibal's campaign is far from over. There are more battles to be fought, more legends to be crafted, and more myths to be busted. Stay tuned as we unravel the next chapter of Hannibal's audacious adventure, where the stakes get higher and the drama even more intense. The Alps were just the opening act in Hannibal's grand performance, and by 216 BC, the stage was set for his magnum opus, the Battle of Cannae. Now, if you're thinking of epic military showdowns, Cannae is up there with the best of them. This battle was like the Super Bowl of ancient warfare, but with more blood and fewer commercials. And trust me, it was one for the history books. Hannibal was up against a Roman force that was bigger, more heavily armed, and confident to the point of cockiness. With nearly 86,000 Roman soldiers facing off against Hannibal's 50,000, the odds weren't just stacked against him. They were practically sky high. Yet, like a master chess player, Hannibal had a few moves that would turn this numerical disadvantage into a tactical symphony. The Romans, bless their hearts, marched into Cannae with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop. Their plan was straightforward: overwhelm Hannibal with sheer numbers. But Hannibal was playing a different game. He had crafted a strategy so cunning it made the Trojan horse look like a schoolyard prank. His piece de résistance, the double envelopment maneuver, it's the kind of tactical brilliance that made military strategists swoon for centuries. Picture this. Hannibal arranged his troops in a crescent formation with his weakest soldiers, the Gauls and Iberians, at the centre, practically inviting the Romans to charge straight at them. And charge they did, like a pack of lemmings racing to the cliff's edge. As the Romans pushed forward, Hannibal executed a classic pincer movement. His elite cavalry, led by the ever-reliable Numidian horsemen, swept in from the sides, encircling the Roman legions in a deadly embrace. It was like watching a python methodically coil around its prey. This wasn't just a battle, it was a tactical masterclass. Hannibal turned the Roman strength into their Achilles' heel. By the time the dust settled, the Roman army was decimated. Estimates suggest as many as 50,000 to 70,000 Romans were killed in a single day. That's more people than you'd find at a sold-out rock concert. It was a staggering loss, one that left Rome reeling and Hannibal's reputation as a military genius firmly cemented. But let's not get carried away with the romance of Hannibal's victory. The harsh reality was that this wasn't just about clever tactics, it was a brutal affair. The battlefield of Cannae was a blood-soaked expanse where the clash of swords and screams of the dying echoed long into the night. It was the grim price of victory, a reminder that behind every military triumph lies a trail of human suffering. Hannibal's victory at Cannae wasn't just about outsmarting the Romans, it was about exploiting their rigidity. Rome's military doctrine was rooted in discipline and straightforward confrontation, a strategy that worked well against lesser foes but was a gift-wrapped present for someone like Hannibal. The Romans believed in the unstoppable force, but Hannibal showed them the power of the immovable object, and then some. Now, let's take a moment to marvel at the sheer audacity of it all. Hannibal was the ultimate improviser, the kind of guy who'd look at a seemingly impossible situation and think, challenge accepted. His ability to adapt on the fly, to turn adversity into opportunity, was a lesson in the importance of flexibility. It's a trait that military leaders have tried to emulate ever since, often with less flair and fewer elephants. While Cannae was a tactical masterpiece, it also served as a strategic wake-up call for Rome. The loss was a gut punch, a stark reminder that overconfidence can be as deadly as enemy swords. The Romans had to learn that adaptability was not just a luxury, but a necessity. They had to rethink their strategies, innovate, and evolve if they were to have any hope of overcoming Hannibal's brilliance. In the grand theatre of war, Hannibal's performance at Cannae was both a triumph and a tragedy, a testament to the heights of human ingenuity and the depths of human cost. It was a battle that shaped the future of warfare, influencing generals from Napoleon to Schwarzkopf. And yet, as the smoke cleared and the bodies were counted, the question remained, what next for Hannibal and his audacious campaign against Rome? As the sun set on the bloody fields of Cannae, Hannibal stood victorious but faced with new challenges. The Romans, though battered, were far from beaten. The battle may have been won, but the war was far from over. Hannibal's journey was only beginning, and the road ahead was fraught with both opportunity and peril. Stay tuned, because the saga of Hannibal Barca is a roller coaster that's only gaining speed. As Hannibal surveyed the aftermath of his triumph at Cannae, he probably felt like the heavyweight champion of ancient warfare. But if history has taught us anything, it's that victory can be a fickle beast. Sure, Hannibal had given Rome a thrashing that would echo through the ages, but the Romans had a knack for rising from the ashes like a particularly stubborn phoenix. The question now was how Rome would adapt, and adapt they did. The Romans were about to pull a strategic rabbit out of their helmet, and Hannibal's honeymoon with victory was about to face some serious turbulence. Let's get one thing straight. Cannae was Rome's wake-up call, and it hit them like a cold shower on a winter morning. They learned the hard way that sheer brute force wasn't going to cut it against a guy who could outthink them at every turn. So what did they do? They took a page from Hannibal's own playbook and got creative. Enter Scipio Africanus, a Roman general who was about to become Hannibal's worst nightmare. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we need to talk about the economic and political landscape of the time. Carthage was a city-state that thrived on trade, a Mediterranean powerhouse with a fleet that once ruled the waves. But here's the kicker. All that glory came with a hefty price tag. Carthage was still reeling from the financial sucker punch of the First Punic War, and Hannibal's campaigns, while audacious, were draining the city's coffers faster than you can say war elephants. Money was tight, and sending reinforcements to Hannibal in Italy wasn't as easy as writing a check. Rome, on the other hand, had resources to spare. Despite the catastrophic losses at Cannae, they still had a vast pool of manpower to draw from, thanks to their extensive system of alliances. It was like having a never-ending supply of action figures in a war game. And while Carthage was busy counting pennies, Rome was busy learning from its mistakes. They switched tactics faster than a chameleon changes colours, adopting a new strategy that would eventually turn the tide against Hannibal. Enter the Fabian strategy, named after Quintus Fabius Maximus, the Roman general who decided that the best way to deal with Hannibal was to avoid him altogether. It was the ancient equivalent of guerrilla warfare, hit-and-run tactics, avoiding pitched battles and generally making life difficult for Hannibal's army. This wasn't just strategy, it was psychological warfare. Fabius understood that if Rome couldn't beat Hannibal head-on, they could at least wear him down. Meanwhile, back in Carthage, things weren't exactly rosy. The city was embroiled in political squabbles that would make modern-day politics look like a friendly debate. The Carthaginian Senate was more interested in protecting their commercial interests than backing Hannibal's military adventures. And let's not forget the ever-present threat of Numidian desertions and the unreliable nature of mercenary troops. Carthage was a city of traders, not warriors, and their priorities reflected that. But let's talk about Scipio Africanus, the man who would eventually give Hannibal a run for his money. After surviving the debacle at Cannae, Scipio didn't just lick his wounds, he took notes. He studied Hannibal's tactics, like a determined student cramming for finals. By the time he came to prominence, Scipio was a walking encyclopedia of Hannibal's methods, ready to flip the script on the Carthaginian general. Scipio wasn't just another Roman general, he was a visionary. He realized that the key to defeating Hannibal was to think like Hannibal. In 209 BC, he launched a daring invasion of Spain, a crucial Carthaginian stronghold. It was a calculated move designed to cut off Hannibal's supply lines and force Carthage to fight on multiple fronts. Scipio's capture of New Carthage, modern Cartagena, was a masterstroke, and it sent shockwaves through the Carthaginian ranks. By 206 BC, Scipio had effectively neutralized Carthage's power in Spain, and he wasn't done yet. He set his sights on North Africa, aiming to bring the war to Carthage's doorstep. It was a bold strategy, but Scipio knew that the only way to defeat Hannibal was to force him to fight on his terms. By 204 BC, Scipio was preparing for the final showdown with Hannibal, a confrontation that would determine the fate of the ancient world. Meanwhile, Hannibal was still in Italy, dealing with the harsh realities of an extended campaign. His troops were exhausted, his resources dwindling, and his allies becoming increasingly unreliable. The Romans had adapted, and their Fabian tactics were slowly grinding down Hannibal's forces. It was a war of attrition, and the once unstoppable Carthaginian general found himself stuck in a quagmire. Hannibal's charisma and tactical genius had brought him this far, but even the greatest generals need more than that to win a war. The tide was turning, and Rome's newfound resilience was proving to be a formidable opponent. Hannibal had won battles, but Rome was playing the long game, and the stakes were higher than ever. As Carthage's political infighting continued to hamper their war effort, Rome was uniting under a single vision. The Romans were learning, adapting, and preparing for the final confrontation that would decide the fate of the ancient world. The stage was set for a clash of titans, and the world was about to witness one of the most epic showdowns in history. So there you have it, the aftermath of Hannibal's victories, the rise of Roman strategic minds, and the shifting tides of war. But don't think for a second that this story is over. The final act is yet to come, and it's going to be a battle for the ages. Stay tuned as we delve into the next chapter of this epic saga, where the stakes get even higher and the drama reaches its peak. The saga of Hannibal Barca is far from over, and the best, or perhaps the worst, is yet to come. So here we are, standing on the precipice of one of history's great dramatic showdowns. Hannibal, the Carthaginian maestro of war, versus Rome's own prodigy, Scipio Africanus. It's 2002 BC, and the stage is set at Zama, a dusty plain in North Africa. This is where Hannibal's audacious campaign finally meets its match. A battle that feels like the universe's way of reminding us that no one stays on top forever. Hannibal has returned from Italy after 16 years of warfare, still full of that trademark bravado, but with fewer elephants and a lot more grey hair. Meanwhile, Scipio is riding high on a wave of victories in Spain and North Africa, ready to bring the fight to Carthage itself. This showdown isn't just a battle, it's a clash of titans, with the fate of empires hanging in the balance. Let's talk numbers. Hannibal's forces are a motley crew of 50,000, including veteran infantry, mercenaries, and, yes, a few elephants, because what's a Hannibal battle without them? On the other side, Scipio commands a disciplined Roman army of 35,000, bolstered by Numidian cavalry led by the defector Massinissa. It's a numerical dead heat with a twist. Scipio's troops are laser-focused, driven by the knowledge that victory means finally kicking the Carthaginian menace off their doorstep. Hannibal's strategy hinges on his elephants, those ancient tanks that had once sent Roman soldiers scattering like bowling pins. But Scipio, ever the student of Hannibal's tactics, has a plan. When those elephants charge, the Roman soldiers part like the Red Sea, allowing the pachyderms to pass harmlessly through lanes in their formations. It's a move straight out of Sun Tzu's yet-to-be-written playbook, demonstrating that knowing your enemy is half the battle. The battle rages on, and it's a brutal affair. Hannibal's veterans fight with the desperation of men who know the stakes, but Scipio's forces are relentless. The Roman infantry, disciplined and cohesive, push through Hannibal's lines, while the Numidian cavalry wreak havoc on the Carthaginian flanks. It's a masterclass in tactical execution, and Hannibal finds himself outmaneuvered at his own game. When the dust settles, it's clear that the winds of fortune have shifted. Hannibal's army is shattered, and Rome emerges victorious. The defeat at Zama isn't just a loss for Carthage, it's the nail in the coffin for Hannibal's ambitions. It's like watching a great actor exit the stage, defeated but not entirely diminished. So what happens next for the man who challenged the might of Rome? Well, Hannibal returns to Carthage, where he tries his hand at politics. He's elected as a Suffet, a kind of chief magistrate, and proves himself a capable administrator. He implements financial reforms to help Carthage recover from the ruinous war indemnities, like a wartime CEO trying to balance the books after a hostile takeover. But Rome, ever the sore winner, isn't content to let sleeping dogs lie. They pressure Carthage to send Hannibal into exile, fearing his influence could spark another conflict. So off he goes, wandering the courts of the ancient world like a military rock star without a venue. He offers his services to places like Tyre and Ephesus, always the tactician, always the strategist, but never quite finding a place to call home. In 83 BC, after a life of battles and banishment, Hannibal's journey comes to an end in Bithynia, in modern-day Turkey. Facing capture by Roman agents, he chooses to take his own life with poison, reportedly saying, Let us relieve the Romans of their fears by the death of a feeble old man. It's a poignant end for a man who had once been Rome's greatest nightmare. But what about Hannibal's legacy? How does history remember this audacious commander who dared to take on an empire? Well, it's a mixed bag, like most legends. On one hand, Hannibal is celebrated as a military genius, a master of tactics whose strategies are still studied in military academies today. His ability to adapt, to strike where least expected, and to turn the tables on his enemies is the stuff of legend. Yet, for all his brilliance, Hannibal's story is also a cautionary tale about the limits of audacity. His inability to secure long-term support from Carthage, the economic strains on his homeland, and the eventual adaptability of the Romans highlight the harsh realities of warfare. It's not just about winning battles, it's about sustaining those victories, managing resources, and securing allies. Modern strategists draw lessons from Hannibal's campaigns, admiring his creativity and adaptability while acknowledging the pitfalls of overextension and isolation. His use of diverse troops, innovative tactics, and psychological warfare continues to inspire military minds, proving that sometimes the most audacious moves are the ones that leave a lasting mark. Hannibal's tale is a testament to the power of boldness, the importance of adaptability, and yes, the occasional tactical use of elephants, though perhaps not in the snow. He remains a symbol of defiance against overwhelming odds, a reminder that even the mightiest empires can be shaken by the daring acts of a single man. In the end, Hannibal Barca's story is one of ambition and audacity, brilliance and folly, victory and defeat. It's a narrative that resonates through the ages, reminding us that history is as much about the characters who dared to defy the status quo as it is about the empires that rose and fell. So as we bid farewell to Hannibal, let's remember him, not just as a military commander, but as a symbol of the human spirit's relentless pursuit of greatness, even in the face of insurmountable odds. The sun is barely peeking over the horizon, yet the hum of activity is already underway in your Zulu kraal. As an elder, you're not just part of the rhythm of life, you set the beat. The air is crisp, the kind that fills your lungs and wakes you up better than any modern-day espresso shot. You're standing on the threshold of your beehive-shaped hut, the thatched roof glistening with morning dew. This is Zululand in the 19th century, where every morning feels like a symphony of purpose and intent. Community life begins with the rituals that bind everyone together. Today, like every day, you're surrounded by the sounds of people and cattle. Let's talk about cattle for a moment. They're not just animals here. They're a walking, mooing version of both your bank account and your social media following. Seriously, cattle are the Zulus' wealth, status symbols, and sometimes even marriage dowries. You can almost hear them mooing about last night's gossip. Your homestead layout is a masterpiece of practicality and tradition. Picture a large circular enclosure called a kraal, with huts arranged in a protective circle around the central cattle pen. Yes, the cattle get the prime real estate. Who knew cows were such high rollers? The kraal isn't just a home, it's a fortress, a community centre, and a symbol of unity, all rolled into one. As the elder, your role is part patriarch, part community guide, and part cattle whisperer. You're the wise one, the Obi-Wan of the kraal, if you will. But with great power comes great responsibility, and that's not just a line from a superhero movie. Your morning involves overseeing the feeding and care of the cattle, ensuring they're healthy and well managed. It's a labor-intensive operation, without any shortcuts or automation. Forget dreaming about a robotic milking machine here. It's all about human hands and daily diligence. Now, let's debunk a myth that's as persistent as a mosquito in the summer. The romanticized notion of Zulu life as carefree and idyllic. Spoiler alert, it's not. Sure, there's a strong sense of community and tradition, but the daily grind is as real as it gets. Take food preparation, for example. It's a full-on team effort, a culinary relay race if you like. From pounding grain to boiling water, it requires hours of work before you even think about tasting that first delicious bite. So, what's on the menu today? Probably ufuthu, a crumbly porridge that's a staple here, made from maize meal. It's simple, nutritious, and about as far from a Michelin-starred dish as you can get, but it's fuel for the day's activities. And speaking of activities, it's not just about managing cattle or cooking. There's also crafting, repairing tools, and maintaining the crackle tasks that would make any DIY enthusiast break into a sweat. This is a pastoral society where the economy is deeply rooted in agriculture and livestock. There's no bustling stock exchange or hedge fund managers here, but the stakes are just as high. A single cow can be worth a small fortune, and losing one could impact your standing in the community. Imagine if your stock portfolio could wander off in the middle of the night. That's the daily reality for you and your fellow Zulu. Yet, even as you hustle through the morning, there's a sense of rhythm and order. It's not about chasing the next big thing or the fear of missing out. It's about sustaining a way of life that's been honed over generations. Each task, from herding cattle to weaving baskets, is a thread in the larger tapestry of Zulu society. And as you stand there, the sun climbing higher in the sky, you know that even amidst the sweat and toil, there's a beauty in this relentless cycle of life. As the elder, you're both a witness and a participant in this grand narrative. The community looks to you for guidance, wisdom, and occasionally a decision on which cattle should be exchanged for a marriage alliance. It's a role that comes with its own set of challenges and rewards, much like a modern CEO, but without the corner office or the company car. So, as the morning unfolds into afternoon, you're not just living history, you're shaping it. And in this world of cattle and community, each day is a testament to resilience, adaptability, and the enduring strength of tradition. As you ponder the tapestry of Zulu life, let's pivot from the daily grind to the grand stage of politics. A thrilling arena of power plays and strategic moves that would make even Game of Thrones look amateurish. Enter King Cetshwayo Kampande, the man at the helm of this vibrant kingdom. Now Cetshwayo isn't just any king. He's the kind of leader who can rally thousands with a mere nod, a true maestro conducting the Zulu symphony against the backdrop of an increasingly complicated world. Born in 1826, Cetshwayo rose to power in a kingdom that was not just about brawn, but also brain. Forget the one-dimensional warrior stereotype. Zulu governance was as intricate as a spider's web, and Cetshwayo was its master weaver. Picture a nation where decisions weren't made in smoke-filled rooms, but in open-air gatherings called Izimbizo, where the king would engage with his warriors and elders, hashing out strategies like a 19th-century board meeting sans the PowerPoint slides. The Zulu hierarchy was as layered as your favorite lasagna. At the top, of course, was Cetshwayo, whose leadership was both revered and feared. Below him were the Izinduna, or chiefs, each managing their own slice of the Zulu pie. But here's the twist. Authority wasn't merely inherited. It was earned through acts of valor and wisdom. The Zulu leadership was like a meritocracy with a dash of hereditary flair talk about keeping your family and your advisors close. Now, amidst this homegrown political ballet, there's an uninvited guest lurking in the wings, the British Empire. By the late 19th century, they weren't just dabbling in tea and crumpets, they were on a colonial shopping spree, eyeing Zululand like a particularly juicy T-bone steak. The British, and their voracious appetite for land, would soon throw a spanner in the Zulu works, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. Cetshwayo's reign marked a period of significant tension between maintaining traditional Zulu customs and navigating the looming shadow of British colonial interests. It's like trying to juggle flaming torches while riding a unicycle, blindfolded. The stakes were high, and Cetshwayo knew it. He was well aware that keeping the British at bay required more than just military might. It needed diplomacy as sharp as a Zulu spear. You see, the British had this persistent knack for underestimating the Zulu, imagining them as primitive warriors rather than a sophisticated society with its own political and economic systems. In reality, the Zulu economy was humming with activity. Cattle, as you've already gathered, were the currency of choice, but let's not forget the vibrant trade networks that stretched across the region. The Zulu were savvy traders, adept at bartering not just cattle, but also ivory, skins, and agricultural produce. This wasn't some backwater barter system. It was a complex economy that fueled a robust society. But back to Cetshwayo, the man steering the ship through turbulent waters. His leadership was a tightrope walk between tradition and the encroaching modern world. On one hand, he maintained the Amabuto system, a regimented age-grade military organization that was both a rite of passage for young Zulu men and a formidable fighting force. On the other hand, Cetshwayo was open to adopting certain European technologies and practices, recognizing that a few rifles might come in handy should the British decide to drop by unannounced. Despite the pressure cooker environment, Cetshwayo managed to keep the Zulu ship steady, until the British decided they preferred their neighbours subjugated rather than sovereign. The British, with their penchant for poking their noses where they didn't belong, issued an ultimatum in December 1878. Their demands were designed to be unacceptable, a classic case of diplomatic bait and switch. When Cetshwayo stood his ground, the stage was set for the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879, a conflict that would test the mettle of the Zulu nation and its monarch. But let's not jump to the battlefields just yet. There's still much to unpack about the delicate dance of diplomacy, tradition, and the relentless march of colonial ambition. Cetshwayo's story is not merely one of resistance, but of resilience, a testament to the complexities of leading a nation at a crossroads. The Zulu king wasn't just a warrior in leopard skins, he was a statesman navigating the treacherous waters of imperial politics with as much finesse as any European counterpart. With the sun now high in the sky, casting its warm glow over Zululand, the day is far from over. The political landscape continues to shift, and the tension between tradition and modernity only grows tighter. This is not just a story of battles and bloodshed, but of a people striving to maintain their identity in a world that's changing faster than a Zulu sprint across the savannah. And as the afternoon unfolds, so too does the intricate narrative of a kingdom on the brink of transformation, where every decision echoes through the annals of history. Stay tuned, because the best, or perhaps the most challenging, is yet to come. As the afternoon sun bathes Zululand in a warm glow, it's time to pivot from the political chessboard to the cultural tapestry that holds this vibrant society together. Now, if you think you've seen an epic dance-off, trust me, the Zulu have been nailing it since way before it was cool. Music, dance, and oral storytelling aren't just for entertainment here. They're the educational tools and social glue that bind the community tighter than a drumhead. Let's talk about the Indlamu, the traditional Zulu dance. Imagine young warriors leaping and stamping with such precision that it feels like the earth might just crack open from excitement. This isn't some casual toe-tapping, it's a full-body workout and a history lesson rolled into one. Each move, each beat, tells a story, whether it's about past battles, ancestral heroes, or the community's values. It's like a living Wikipedia page, but with a killer rhythm section. And then there's the music. Forget pop charts here. The soundtrack of life is woven from the rich tapestry of drums, whistles, and the unmistakable call of the Isikathamaya choirs. These aren't your average bathroom singers. These are vocal athletes, their harmonies resonating with tales of migration, resistance, and survival. It's music that gets under your skin, reminding you that history is not just learned, but felt. Now, let's flip the coin and consider the European perspective. The Europeans, often about as subtle as a vuvuzela at a chess tournament. Many 19th century European observers dismissed these vibrant cultural expressions as mere primitive pastimes. They couldn't fathom how storytelling and dance could be integral to education and governance. It's like looking at a smartphone and calling it a fancy paperweight. The irony, of course, is that while the Europeans were busy writing off Zulu culture, they were also jotting down these savage practices with a mix of fascination and condescension in their leather-bound journals. But let's not forget the oral storytelling, the heart of Zulu education. In a time before textbooks and PowerPoint presentations, history was passed down through Isinganekwane or folk tales. These weren't just bedtime stories, they were the Netflix of their day. Only instead of binge-watching, you listened. Through cunning animals and wise elders, these tales conveyed moral lessons and historical knowledge. It's a narrative tradition that ensures the past is never forgotten, even when the future is uncertain. And speaking of uncertainty, let's tackle one of the most persistent myths, Zulu militarism. The image of the fierce Zulu warrior, spear in hand, charging into battle, has been etched into history books like a scene from a blockbuster movie. But this narrative, while thrilling, is only part of the story. The famed Zulu regiments, or Amabutho, were more than just fighting forces. They were community builders, educators, and custodians of culture. These regiments weren't solely about brawn, they were about brains. boys were grouped together by age and trained not just in warfare, but in discipline, respect, and community service. It was a rite of passage, a social institution that reinforced bonds and ensured the continuity of Zulu customs. It's as if boot camp met a finishing school, with a curriculum that balanced spear throwing with societal responsibilities. But let's debunk another myth while we're here, the idea that Zulu warfare was all about brute force. Sure, the Zulu were formidable on the battlefield, but their tactics were as sharp as their spears. Take the legendary buffalo horn formation, a strategic masterstroke that outmaneuvered many an enemy. It was about outthinking, not just outmuscling, the opposition. This wasn't just a test of strength. It was a chess game played on the savannah, with each move calculated to perfection. Meanwhile, the Europeans, in their red coats and heavy boots, often underestimated these tactics, dismissing them as primitive. But for all their fancy uniforms and advanced weaponry, it was the Zulus' mastery of terrain and strategy that often left European forces scratching their heads and counting their losses. It's a classic case of underestimating the opponent, like bringing a knife to a gunfight, only to find out your knife is actually a Swiss Army knife with a built-in strategy manual. As the day wears on and the sun begins its descent, the cultural fabric of Zululand remains vibrant and unyielding. It's a tapestry woven from the threads of music, dance, and storytelling, each strand a testament to resilience and identity. And while the world around them changes at a dizzying pace, these traditions stand firm, a reminder of the past and a guide for the future. So, as you stand amidst the rhythms and stories of Zululand, you understand that this is more than just a day in the life. It's a living legacy, a dance of history that continues to unfold with each beat of the drum and every tale told. Stay tuned, because the next chapters will delve even deeper into this rich and compelling narrative. There's much more to discover, and the journey is far from over. As the sun dips below the horizon, painting Zululand in shades of amber and indigo, let's take a closer look at the social dynamics that keep this vibrant community humming like a well-tuned musical ensemble. See, in the Zulu community, every note matters, from the steady bass of the elders to the sharp, lively trill of the women. They don't just play supporting roles in the daily drama of life, they're pivotal characters in this ongoing saga. First up, the elders. Picture them as the Google of their time, an organic repository of wisdom and history, minus the annoying pop-up ads. They're the ones who remember the names of your great-great-grandparents and the details of treaties made under starlit skies. In a society without written records, their memories are as precious as gold dust. It's like having a living library, accessible 24/7, no Wi-Fi required. Elders hold sway in the Kraal's decision-making process, their voices as influential as a trending hashtag. They mediate disputes, settle cattle-related squabbles, and even preside over marriage negotiations with the precision of a seasoned diplomat. Their authority isn't just a relic of age, it's a badge of respect earned through years of service and sacrifice. In Zulu culture, getting older doesn't mean getting obsolete. Quite the opposite, in fact. It's like leveling up in a game where experience points are the ultimate currency. Now, Western narratives often paint the elderly in traditional societies as passive, waiting out their days in the shade. But that's a misconception, as misleading as a mirage in the desert. Zulu elders are active participants in the community's life. Their influence is palpable as the evening breeze. They embody a living continuity, bridging past and present in a dance of wisdom and guidance. On the flip side of the social coin, we have the women of the Zulu community, dynamic forces defying Victorian-era stereotypes of demure domesticity. In the economic and social life of the Kraal, women are the unsung heroes, the backbone who keep the wheels turning. They manage households, cultivate crops, and ensure everyone's fed with the efficiency of a Swiss watch. And let's not forget their role in crafting, weaving, pottery, and beadwork are not just hobbies, but vital economic activities. Their creations are trade goods as valuable as any cattle, adding colour and commerce to the community. Western observers often missed this nuance, viewing Zulu women through a narrow lens that skewed towards condescension. The reality, of course, is that Zulu women navigate their world with agency and authority that would make any suffragette proud. They hold significant sway in family and community matters, their opinions weighed with the same gravity as their male counterparts. It's a society where gender roles are distinct yet fluid, each complementing the other in a harmonious balance that's far more modern than some might assume. And while we're at it, let's tackle the notion of justice in Zulu society. Forget the image of rough frontier justice or arbitrary decrees. The legal systems here are as structured and nuanced as any modern court, albeit without the judicial robes and gavels. Justice is dispensed through traditional courts, often held in the open under the watchful eyes of the community, where transparency is as clear as the African sky. At the heart of this system is the Induna, a local leader who acts as both judge and mediator. Imagine Judge Judy, but with a dash more dignity and a lot more cultural context. The Induna listens, weighs evidence, and delivers verdicts that aim for reconciliation, not retribution. The goal isn't just to punish, but to restore harmony, to weave the social fabric back together after it's been torn by conflict. Take a land dispute, for example. Rather than a drawn-out legal battle, the Induna facilitates a dialogue, encouraging both parties to present their case and reach a mutually agreeable solution. It's a process that emphasizes community over individual, a restorative approach that seeks to mend relationships, not sever them. Meanwhile, the community acts as both jury and audience, ensuring that justice isn't just done, but seen to be done. It's a system that values consensus and collective responsibility, a far cry from the top-down legal systems imposed by colonial powers. The Zulu approach to justice is as much about maintaining social cohesion as it is about doling out punishment, a nuanced dance of fairness and diplomacy. As the evening deepens, casting long shadows across the Creole, the roles of women, elders, and the legal system come into sharper focus. They challenge Western preconceptions with their complexity and sophistication, revealing a society that thrives on balance, respect, and mutual support. It's a community where each member, from the youngest child to the eldest elder, plays a vital role in the grand tapestry of life. And just as the stars begin to twinkle above, casting their ancient light on the land below, we're reminded that this story is far from over. The Zulu community, with its vibrant culture and intricate social structures, is a testament to resilience and adaptability, a living legacy that continues to unfold under the vast African sky. Stay tuned, because the next chapters promise even more revelations in this ongoing narrative of history and humanity. As the stars twinkle above Zululand, casting their ancient light on the land below, it's time to pull back the curtain on a pivotal chapter in Zulu history, the Anglo-Zulu War of 1879. This conflict isn't just a footnote in history, it's a full-blown saga of resilience, strategy, and the clash of two vastly different worlds. Think of it as a historical potboiler, where the stakes are as high as the towering Drakensberg Mountains. Now, let's set the scene. The war kicked off with a bang at the Battle of Isandlwana on January 22, 1879. Picture this. A Zulu force of around 20,000 warriors, using nothing but their famed assegais and cowhide shields, delivers a stunning defeat to a British contingent armed with Martini Henry rifles. The British, confident in their technological superiority, were caught off guard, their red coats standing out like targets against the African landscape. It was a classic case of hubris meeting its match, and the Zulu proved that strategy and courage could sometimes trump firepower. But don't let the dramatic victory fool you into thinking this was a simple David versus Goliath story. The Zulu weren't just wielding spears, they were wielding tactics as sharp as any bayonet. Their famous buffalo horn formation flanked the British, encircling them with a precision that would make any military strategist proud. It was a battle that left around 3,000 British and colonial troops dead, and sent shockwaves across the British Empire, prompting a re-evaluation of colonial policy in southern Africa. And yet, for all its triumph, Isandlwana was just the beginning. The British, not exactly known for taking losses gracefully, regrouped with a vengeance. They brought in reinforcements, including heavy artillery and Gatling guns, determined to teach the Zulu a lesson in imperial dominance. Cue the Battle of Rorke's Drift, where a small British garrison managed to hold off a vastly larger Zulu force. It was the kind of underdog story that Victorian Britain loved, complete with acts of valour that would later be immortalised in films and medals. As the war dragged on, the Zulu faced not just the might of the British military, but the relentless march of colonial ambition. By July 1879, the British, under the command of Lord Chelmsford, dealt a decisive blow at the Battle of Ulundi, effectively ending the war. Set Shwayo, the Zulu king who had so deftly navigated the choppy waters of diplomacy and warfare, was captured and sent into exile. Zululand was subsequently annexed, and the once proud kingdom was carved up and parcelled out, its autonomy reduced to a colonial footnote. But here's the kicker. The Zulu, despite their defeat, managed to retain a sense of identity and resilience that would outlast the British Empire itself. The legacy of the Anglo-Zulu War is not one of abject defeat, but of tenacity and adaptability. The Zulu people, while subjugated politically, continued to resist culturally, maintaining their traditions, language, and social structures in the face of colonial pressure. It's a testament to their resilience that, while the British Empire eventually crumbled, Zulu culture endures to this day. Now, let's zoom out and consider the broader implications. The Anglo-Zulu War wasn't just a clash of arms, it was a microcosm of the colonial encounter, a narrative of domination and resistance that played out across the globe. Colonialism, with its promises of progress and civilization, often left a legacy of division and disruption. The borders drawn in the aftermath of such conflicts often ignored ethnic and cultural realities, sowing seeds of tension that would persist long after the colonizers had packed up and left. Yet, in the face of these external pressures, the Zulu demonstrated a remarkable ability to adapt and survive. They navigated the imposed changes with a pragmatism that belied the romanticized image of the noble savage. This adaptability is a crucial part of their legacy, a reminder that history is not just about battles won or lost, but about the enduring strength of a people to maintain their identity amidst change. So, as you consider the stars above Zululand, take a moment to reflect on the lessons of this history. The story of the Zulu is not just a tale of conquest and colonization, but of resilience and resurgence. It's a reminder that history is not a static tableau, but a dynamic process, a dance of adaptation and resistance that continues to shape our world today. In our globalized world, understanding the context of such historical narratives is more important than ever. It's about recognizing the complexity of the past and the legacies that continue to influence the present. The story of the Zulu is not just theirs, it's a shared human narrative of struggle, resilience, and the never-ending quest for dignity and identity. As the night deepens and the constellations trace their ancient paths across the sky, remember that history is not just a series of dates and battles. It's a tapestry woven from the threads of countless lives and stories, each contributing to the rich, complex fabric of our shared human experience. And in this grand tapestry, the Zulu have left an indelible mark, a testament to the enduring power of resilience and the unyielding spirit of a people who refuse to be defined by anyone but themselves. In the mid-19th century, America was a bit like your old dial-up internet, painfully slow and prone to disconnection. The year was 1860. And the nation was tearing at the seams with the looming threat of civil war, the gold rush in California, and the promise, or curse, of manifest destiny. Yet, despite all these heady developments, the country's communication network was as sophisticated as a tin can telephone. Getting a letter from one end of the continent to the other could take weeks, if not months, and by the time your sweet missive reached its destination, the news was often as stale as last week's bread. The United States was growing faster than a teenager's appetite, stretching from the Atlantic all the way to the Pacific. But let's not kid ourselves, the infrastructure was lagging behind this rapid growth like a 56K modem trying to stream Netflix. The telegraph was around, sure, but it hadn't yet cast its web over the entire nation. The idea of instant communication was as futuristic as flying cars. For those living in California, it felt like they were on a different planet, where news from Washington arrived long after it was relevant. Enter the Pony Express, the brainchild of three enterprising men, William H. Russell, Alexander Majors, and William B. Waddell. These guys looked at America's communication woes and decided to gamble on what can only be described as a wild, harebrained scheme more suited for an action-adventure movie than real life. The plan? Hire a bunch of young, fearless riders to gallop across nearly 2,000 miles of treacherous terrain, from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento, California, in a bid to deliver mail faster than any method previously concocted. Imagine it as the original extreme sport, with the added challenge of dodging everything from bandits to blizzards. Now, this was no small endeavour. We're talking about a relay system involving 80 riders and nearly 500 horses, covering 1,966 miles of some of the most inhospitable land in North America. The cost? A whopping 5 per half ounce of mail, equivalent to about 150 in today's money. So, you better have penned some truly heartfelt words if you were going to pay that much to send a letter. William H. Russell was the charismatic frontman of this operation, and by all accounts he had a flair for the dramatic. Picture him as the slightly delusional entrepreneur pitching the Pony Express as if it were the next big thing in Silicon Valley. He was the kind of guy who could sell ice to an Eskimo or, in this case, sell the idea of crossing the Rockies on horseback as a sensible business model. But let's be real, this was a logistical nightmare. The route was a veritable obstacle course of natural and human threats. Riders had to contend with scorching deserts, freezing mountains, and hostile encounters with Native American tribes whose lands these riders were, quite frankly, trespassing on. Safety measures were practically non-existent. The only requirement for riders was that they be orphans preferred, a grim nod to the job's inherent danger. Yet, despite these odds, the Pony Express captured the imagination of the public. It was the stuff of legend, the embodiment of American bravado and resilience. It was a romantic notion, brave young men racing against time and the elements, their only companion, a trusty steed and the leather satchel of mail slung across their bodies. It was a narrative tailor made for tall tales and dime novels, even if the reality was far less glamorous. The Pony Express officially kicked off on April 3, 1860, with simultaneous departures from St. Joseph and Sacramento. Each rider covered about 75 to 100 miles per day, changing horses every 10 to 15 miles at one of the Untold relay stations scattered along the route. The fastest delivery on record was a message of Abraham Lincoln's inaugural address, taking just under 8 days to make the journey from coast to coast, a blistering pace for the time. However, let's not romanticize this too much. For the riders, it was no joyride. The pay was $25 a week, a decent sum back then, but hardly worth the risk of life and limb. And while the memory of the Pony Express conjures images of fearless young men, it was more often a tale of exhaustion, danger, and the constant threat of death. Riders faced attacks, wild weather, and the ever-present possibility of getting lost in the vast wilderness with nothing but a horse and a dwindling supply of hardtack. Despite its daring premise, the Pony Express was less a sustainable business model and more a Hail Mary pass. It was a stopgap solution, a flashy but impractical attempt to bridge a communication gap that was rapidly closing with the expansion of the telegraph. Indeed, the Pony Express was a victim of its own timing. In October 1861, just 18 months after its inception, the completion of the transcontinental telegraph line spelled the end for the daring riders and their trusty steeds. So, while the Pony Express is immortalized in American folklore, the truth is, it was more of a blip on the historical radar. It was a last gasp of the old world, a desperate yet audacious attempt to keep pace in an era hurtling toward modernity. But for those 18 months, it was the embodiment of American grit and determination, a reminder that sometimes the craziest ideas, even if fleeting, are the ones that capture our imaginations the most. The Pony Express may have been a fleeting comet in the night sky of American history, but during its brief existence, it was a spectacle of speed and grit. Picture this, a relay race of epic proportions, with horses as the athletes and riders as the relay batons. The Express was an operation as delicate as it was daring, relying on a chain of 184 relay stations strategically peppered along the nearly 2,000-mile route. Each station was a vital cog in this galloping machine, spaced roughly 10 to 15 miles apart. The perfect distance for a horse to sprint at top speed before needing a breather and a fresh set of hooves. The riders, often teenage boys, were the adrenaline junkies of their time, living the Wild West version of an extreme sport. And let's be honest, they probably had better hair than your average rock star, albeit perpetually windblown. These young daredevils signed up for a gig that paid $25 a week, decent money back then, about $800 in today's cash. But the job description read like a death wish disguised as a thrilling adventure. They had to be lightweight, nimble, and preferably orphans, because, fewer people to mourn if things went south. Once a rider swung into the saddle, it was off to the races. Galloping through vast plains, scaling mountain passes, and navigating treacherous deserts, they faced everything from bandits to blizzards. The job wasn't just about endurance, it was about survival. The irony, of course, is that this perilous occupation became romanticized in the American consciousness. The image of the lone rider, silhouetted against a blazing sunset, captured the imagination of the public, even while the reality was as stark as the desert landscape they traversed. Now, about that 5 price tag for a half-ounce letter, an eye-watering sum in the 1860s. It sounds like the Pony Express was running a luxury mail service, but it was more of a necessity than a novelty. If you were willing to cough up the cash, it meant you had something crucial to say. Imagine, if you will, paying today's equivalent of $150 to send a text message. You'd hope it was something more profound than, "Hey, what's up?" The costs weren't just monetary. Riders faced an array of hazards that would make any modern-day adrenaline junkie reconsider their life choices. There were the obvious threats, natural disasters, hostile encounters with Native American tribes whose lands were being trespassed, and the ever-looming spectre of getting lost in the middle of nowhere. But there were also the mundane challenges. The fatigue of riding up to 100 miles in a day, the monotony of the landscape, and the stark solitude that came with riding alone for hours on end. It's crucial to remember that while the Pony Express was a marvel of logistics, it was also a colossally expensive operation. Feeding and maintaining 500 horses, staffing all those relay stations, and paying the riders added up fast. The venture was less a financial success, and more a testament to human perseverance in the face of insurmountable odds. It was, quite literally, a race against time, both for the letters they carried and the very existence of the Pony Express itself. For all its daring and bravado, the Pony Express was a flash in the pan, overshadowed by the relentless march of technology. The telegraph, with its promise of instant communication, was coming, and it was about as merciful to the Pony Express as a lion to a gazelle. But those 18 months of operation were a masterclass in human tenacity, and the willingness to risk everything for the chance to connect a nation. The riders, those unsung heroes of the Wild West, became legends in their own right. Figures like Pony Bob Haslam and William Buffalo Bill Cody, yes, the same Buffalo Bill who would later become a showman, rode their way into the annals of history. Their stories, often embellished but rooted in truth, added to the allure and mystique of the Pony Express. It's a classic case of the legend outpacing the reality, but isn't that the way with all great tales? The truth might be gritty, but the stories we tell ourselves are what keep the spirit alive. Yet, for all the mythology, it's essential to ground ourselves in the reality of the time. The Pony Express was a reflection of an America that was changing at breakneck speed. It was a country grappling with its own identity, stretching from coast to coast, and the Express was a manifestation of that restless, pioneering spirit. It was a footnote in history, yes, but one that left an indelible mark on the American psyche. As we gallop through this tale, let's not forget the human element at the heart of it all. The riders, the horses, the station keepers. They were all part of an extraordinary endeavour that, despite its brief lifespan, captured the essence of a nation on the cusp of modernity. The Pony Express was a wild ride, a testament to the audacity of human ambition, and a poignant reminder that sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that leave the most lasting impressions. But our journey with the Pony Express is far from over. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the myths, the realities, and the ultimate fate of this legendary enterprise. There's more to uncover, more stories to tell, and more truths to reveal as we continue our exploration of this fascinating chapter in American history. And speaking of audacity, let's get into the real meat of why the Pony Express, despite its iconic status, was more of a financial sinkhole than a golden goose. Imagine trying to run a business where your costs are skyrocketing like a helium balloon, but your revenue is more like a lead balloon. Welcome to the world of the Pony Express. First off, let's talk numbers. The Pony Express was a logistical beast, requiring constant feeding and care for its 500 horses, not to mention the infrastructure of 84 relay stations stretching across nearly 2,000 miles. Each of these stations needed upkeep, supplies, and staff. Riders, daring as they were, didn't work for free. That 25 a week might sound quaint now, but it added up when you had 80 riders on the payroll. And then there were the horses, those hardy steeds that needed to be replaced every 10 to 15 miles. We're talking about a massive operational cost that was hemorrhaging money faster than a gambler at a rigged poker table. The Pony Express charged 5 per half ounce of mail, equivalent to about 150 today. Sure, it sounds like a luxury service, but when you factor in the expenses, it was more like a desperate attempt to stay afloat. The service needed to deliver around 30,000 letters annually just to break even, but it never came close. In reality, the Pony Express carried fewer than 35,000 pieces of mail during its entire existence. In today's terms, they were essentially running a start-up with no viable path to profitability. To add to the financial drama, William H. Rain. Russell, one of the founding partners, was a bit over his head. He was the kind of guy who'd bet the farm on a long shot and then double down just to keep things interesting. Russell's financial mismanagement was legendary. At one point, he was caught embezzling government bonds to keep the venture going, a move as ill-advised as trying to pay off a credit card with another credit card. Not exactly the kind of business acumen you'd want in an enterprise already teetering on the brink. Then there's the looming spectre of the transcontinental telegraph, which was advancing like a technological juggernaut. By 1861, the telegraph line was completed, connecting the east and west coasts with a string of electric whispers that rendered the Pony Express obsolete. Why pay a premium for a letter to be carried by a half-starved teenager on horseback when you could send a message instantly? It was like trying to sell ice boxes when refrigerators were hitting the market. The writing was on the wall, or more accurately, on the telegraph wire. The political climate only added to the urgency. As the nation teetered on the edge of civil war, the government was desperate for faster communication, especially with California's gold and strategic importance hanging in the balance. The Pony Express was a stopgap solution at best, a flashy band-aid on a wound that needed stitches. The government knew the telegraph was the future, and they weren't about to invest heavily in a dying medium. Yet, the Pony Express wasn't just battling technology and economics, it was also up against the clock. The Civil War was on the horizon, and the need for rapid communication became more pressing. The Pony Express was riding into a storm of change, with its riders galloping against a tide that would soon wash away their efforts. Still, for all its fiscal follies, the Pony Express left a legacy far beyond its balance sheet. It became a symbol of American ingenuity and daring, a story of grit and determination in the face of insurmountable odds. The legend of the Pony Express riders, those young men who risked life and limb to deliver the mail, captured the public's imagination in a way that spreadsheets and profit margins never could. But legends don't pay the bills, and the cold, hard truth was that the Pony Express was as unsustainable as it was audacious. It serves as a fascinating case study in the annals of American history, a reminder that sometimes the most daring ventures are the ones that burn the brightest, even if only for a fleeting moment. As we continue our journey through the tale of the Pony Express, we'll uncover more about its impact and the myths that have grown around it like wildflowers on the prairie. Stay tuned, because the ride isn't over yet. And now we reach the part of our story where the Pony Express, for all its romanticized glory, hits the proverbial brick wall, or in this case, the telegraph wire. It's October 1861, and the world of communication is about to experience a seismic shift. Imagine the Pony Express riders, with their dust-covered faces and windswept hair, suddenly finding themselves outpaced, not by faster horses, but by the relentless march of technology. The completion of the transcontinental telegraph was like the moment when smartphones made flip phones look like relics from another era. This wasn't just a small step for man, it was a giant leap for mankind, or at least for messages. Faster than you can say, Western Union, the telegraph line connected the east and west coasts, zapping messages across the country with the speed of lightning. Suddenly, the idea of a young rider galloping through treacherous terrain seemed as outdated as using smoke signals. On October 24, 1861, the first telegraph message zipped across the wires, signalling the end of the Pony Express with all the sentiment of a door slamming shut. The message was from California Chief Justice Stephen Field to President Abraham Lincoln, a simple note of congratulations, but it might as well have been a death knell for the riders. The Pony Express was officially obsolete. a casualty of progress that didn't even get a farewell parade. It's important to remember that the Pony Express wasn't expected to last forever. It was always a stopgap, a flashy, daring attempt to bridge a communication chasm that was rapidly closing. The telegraph was the future, and it wasn't about to slow down for a bunch of horseback-riding thrill-seekers. The writing had been on the wall, or rather, buzzing along the wire for some time. The venture's backers knew it, and the riders probably did too, though perhaps they hoped for a little more time in the saddle. The abruptness of the transition was as unsentimental as a corporate layoff. In a matter of days, the Pony Express was disbanded. Stations were closed, horses were sold off, and the riders were left to find new ways to flirt with danger. William H. Russell, Alexander Majors, and William B. Waddell, the trio behind this audacious venture, were left to pick up the pieces of their financial debacle. You could almost picture them sitting around a table, heads in hands, wondering how their grand dream had unravelled so quickly. The financial wreckage was staggering. Russell, who had been juggling the books like a circus act, found himself neck-deep in debt. He was a man who had gambled big and lost bigger, a high-stakes player who had bet everything on a long shot. And like many gamblers, he ended up with nothing but empty pockets and shattered dreams. His financial escapades, including attempts to secure government contracts through less than legal means, left him with a tarnished reputation and a mountain of liabilities. Economically, the Pony Express was a non-starter. While it captured imaginations, it hemorrhaged money like a sieve, never coming close to breaking even. For all its daring, the operation was a textbook example of style over substance, a lesson in the perils of romanticizing a financially unviable venture. Yet, in a way, its failure was as iconic as its brief existence, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most memorable ventures are those that defy logic and reason. Despite the financial fiasco, the legacy of the Pony Express lived on, a symbol of American ambition and the relentless pursuit of progress. It was a story that resonated with the American spirit, a tale of grit and daring that overshadowed its economic realities. People loved the idea of the Pony Express, even if the balance sheet told a different story. And what lessons did we learn from this grand experiment in speed and endurance? Well, for one, it reinforced the age-old wisdom that timing is everything. The Pony Express was a marvel of logistics and human determination, but it was a marvel whose time was up almost as soon as it began. It was a reminder that innovation waits for no one, and those who don't adapt are left in the dust. As the telegraph wires hummed with new possibilities, the riders who once braved the wilderness for a living had to find new paths. Some, like William Buffalo Bill Cody, capitalized on their legendary status, turning their adventures into entertainment and myth. Others faded into obscurity, their stories lost to time, like so many other forgotten pioneers. But the Pony Express, despite its brief and tumultuous existence, left an indelible mark on history. It became a symbol of a bygone era, a reminder of a time when the world was a little wilder, a little more adventurous, and a lot more uncertain. It was a chapter in the story of America's relentless drive to connect its disparate parts, a tale of risk and reward that continues to capture the imagination. As we look back on the Pony Express, it's easy to see it as a relic of a simpler time. But in reality, it was anything but simple. It was a complex, daring enterprise born out of necessity, a bold attempt to conquer the vast distances of a growing nation. And while it may have ended in financial ruin, its legacy endures, a testament to the audacity of human ambition and the relentless march of progress. As we wrap up this chapter on the rise and fall of the Pony Express, let's not forget the human element at the heart of it all. The riders, the horses, the station keepers, they were all part of an extraordinary endeavour that, despite its brief lifespan, captured the essence of a nation on the cusp of modernity. The Pony Express was a wild ride, a testament to the audacity of human ambition, and a poignant reminder that sometimes the craziest ideas are the ones that leave the most lasting impressions. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the myths, the truths, and the enduring legacy of the Pony Express. There's more to uncover, more stories to tell, and more lessons to learn as we delve deeper into this fascinating chapter of American history. The ride isn't over yet, and neither is our exploration of the remarkable tale of the Pony Express. So, here we are, standing at the crossroads of myth and reality, ready to unravel the tangled legacy of the Pony Express. For a venture that could barely keep its financial head above water, it sure managed to gallop into the annals of American folklore with the gusto of a Hollywood blockbuster. But isn't that just like us? Give us a story of grit and glory, and we'll turn it into an epic, even if the truth is less glamorous than we like to remember. Let's start with the myths, that glittering layer of legend we adore so much. The Pony Express is often romanticized as a triumph of ingenuity, a tale of brave young men conquering the wild frontier with nothing but a horse and a dream. It's the kind of story that makes you want to saddle up and ride into the sunset with the wind in your hair and adventure in your heart. But before you grab your cowboy hat, let's take a hard look at the reality. First off, the Pony Express was a logistical nightmare. Running a relay system across 1,966 miles of some of the harshest terrain in the country was about as easy as solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. The company burned through resources, like a teenager burns through data on an unlimited plan. Each of those 184 relay stations required staffing, supplies, and maintenance, while the riders, who were paid $25 a week, equivalent to about $800 today, risked life and limb for the thrill of delivering mail faster than ever before. And let's talk about those riders. We picture them as fearless icons of American determination, but the job was more grueling than glamorous. Imagine riding up to 100 miles a day, through blinding blizzards and sweltering deserts, with only a leather satchel and your wits to guide you. The job was so dangerous that the company preferred orphans, an unsettling nod to the risk involved. Yet these riders, with names like Pony Bob, Haslam, and William Buffalo Bill Cody, became legends, their stories woven into the fabric of American mythology. Now, here's where things get particularly interesting. Despite its brief existence and financial collapse, the Pony Express became an enduring symbol of American tenacity. It was a story that resonated with the public, capturing the imagination of a nation that was itself stretched between the old and the new, the familiar and the uncharted. The Express embodied the restless spirit of a country on the move, a place where dreams were chased with the same fervor that the riders chased the horizon. But why do we cling to such legends, even when the reality is far less heroic? Perhaps it's because we love the idea of the underdog, the impossible dreamer who defies the odds and emerges victorious, even if that victory is fleeting. The Pony Express was a testament to the audacity of human ambition, a reminder that sometimes the wildest ideas are the ones that capture our hearts. From an economic standpoint, the Pony Express was a disaster, a venture that hemorrhaged money while barely breaking even. Yet, in the grand tapestry of history, it wasn't the financials that mattered. It was the spirit of the thing, the notion that a few brave souls were willing to risk everything for the chance to connect a nation. It's a story that appeals to our love of adventure, our yearning for a time when the world was a little wilder, a little more unpredictable. And what about the practical realities? Well, the Pony Express was less about delivering letters and more about proving a point. It was a demonstration of what could be achieved with determination and grit, a precursor to the technological innovations that would soon transform the landscape. It was a bridge between the old world and the new, a last gasp of the frontier spirit before the telegraph line rendered such daring feats obsolete. Yet, for all its impracticality, the Pony Express left an indelible mark on the American psyche. It became a symbol of perseverance, a testament to the power of human will in the face of insurmountable odds. It was a story that resonated with the pioneer spirit, the same spirit that drove settlers westward in search of new beginnings. As we reflect on the legacy of the Pony Express, it's worth considering what it reveals about us as a people. We are dreamers, driven by the allure of the unknown, the thrill of the chase. We are a nation that values courage and determination, even when it's wrapped in a package of impossible dreams. The Pony Express, for all its flaws and failures, is a reminder of the audacity of human ambition and the relentless drive to connect the world, even if only for a brief moment in time. So, as we close the book on this chapter of history, let's not forget the lessons the Pony Express offers. It's a reminder that sometimes the journey is just as important as the destination, that the stories we tell ourselves are what keep the spirit alive. The Pony Express may have been a fleeting comet in the night sky of history, but its legacy endures, a testament to the power of the impossible dream. And isn't that, in the end, what makes history so irresistibly fascinating?